The City of Duval Committee of the Whole workshop for March 18th to order at 5:32 p.m. The first item, anything for the good of the order. Jen Burnett.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple items and I sent an email ahead of time, just right before the meeting, so if you wanted to look at it, but AEs came up again and it reminded me of the effort I put in a little over a year ago to research the possibility of getting an AED at the Rock Ballpark. And I had communicated and gone to one of the meetings with Project 100. It's through the Nicholas Bryan Foundation, which is also related to sudden cardiac arrest, and specifically any athlete. And Project 100 is something within that program, and they're trying to get AEDs in sport field in the community. And when I first looked into this, they had not yet found a location and installed one. And now they have two that they've put in, one at North Shore Athletic Fields, which I believe is the field in Woodinville, and then Crestwood Park, which is in Brooklyn. So they have two under their belt, and I know there's others, I've seen them in other places, but through this program specifically. And I would love for the city to look into getting one at Big Rock Ballpark, and I know we already have AEDs within the city, so we're getting familiarity with, maintaining AEDs. And I am curious if we could get outside funding. I'm guessing the capital cost of purchasing it, the community would generously donate for that. I've heard from several people when I first started working on it, they would do a fundraiser. The cost to the city would end up being the main maintenance of it. And so I still need to get more details, and maybe I can talk to some of the other municipalities who have installed them to find out, what their experience has been so far. But I'm just curious if others are interested in this. And I should pursue it, but I have heard that there's a lot of interest in the community, so I don't know.
I'm curious, just sort of one follow-up question around you mentioned the Project 100 and the Nicotan Foundation.
Yeah.
If it's paid for by sort of community and then maintained by city, what is their role in actually, do they provide any funding or grant matching? I was just trying to figure out from a foundation perspective what their role is if it's being funded by the community.
Right. I assume that they would also participate in potentially the funding or other aspects, but like I said, I haven't dove in super deep because I was just curious if the council was interested in looking at something like that, if I went and got additional information.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I had separately brought this up last year or so, and so I was curious if we had any progress on that there was interest in the community. But I know that there's some involvement on like where it would be placed in that, so I wasn't sure if that was something we kind of on the back burner that we've been working on.
And I saw that you came in a little steep. I didn't know if you caught the tail end of that conversation.
I can double check in the, but I don't think we budgeted it.
Yes.
But the case, an AED should be under 1,800 volt.
So the ones that they have installed at parks outside have a little camera and they're temperature controlled. So they can be placed outside, and I have seen them. There's a park, Everett, that has one, if I remember right. But anyway, it's a little bit different than one that would be placed inside because of the security. But they've been successfully deployed in lots of places, so it's definitely been done. So.
We don't have Wi-Fi up there, so camera wouldn't give us a signal unless it's posted.
Yeah.
It's held it.
Yeah, I don't know if the camera is actually sending or if it's just like a black box recording what happened.
Does the council want to take an action on that? But just from a research perspective, again, not knowing what's involved, but rather than sort of discuss it here, and you brought it forward, but it sounds like there's some interest. I know you brought it up, but you said last year. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, I think, I do recall Luke, our emergency manager, talking about AEDs, and this is a big part of his job, is safety. So I would recommend that we have Cynthia follow up with Luke, because I know this is something that's been on his list.
And one other about AEDs, someone posted about the screening that you can have to see if they're more susceptible to sudden cardiac arrest. And within that conversation, I remembered, hey, we have quite a few AEDs, and there's a website that you can go to. Well, actually, it's an app. It's Pulse Point AED. Some people might be familiar with Pulse Point. It's used by first responders. And there are actually quite a few AEDs in our community, but what I noticed is the one at City Hall, I believe there's one at City Hall. I think there's a few that we purchased last year. I remember it was announced that we had them. And those are not on the Pulse Point AED. And there's a lot, like the fitness center has one, the library has one, the school district has one. Well, there's a lot in town. But I just thought, that might be kind of a good idea to have ours registered as well as being available to look at public location. Thing has been done.
It just sounds like if, we could get a follow-up at some point, and if it ends up needing an action from council, that it could just Mayor Pro Tem put it on your calendar.
We will look into it, both things, registration and the programming costs of putting in the AED big room.
Any other items for good of the order?
I'm gonna bring something out because I don't know where else it would belong in our discussion, but this has to do with the state legislative bills. For the summary that Cynthia, I believe you sent that out from our consultant or lobbyist consultant. There's a number of bills on there that I think we, the council, need to be aware of, but if you already are, I apologize. I scanned through that, and a few of them really grabbed my attention as to potential impact for Duval in particular. One was the Housing Availability Act. This has two parts. Allows, meaning it's optional, or city or county that is required to plan with both management act to submit their housing element to the Department of Commerce for review. And maybe we're doing that, Laura, already. I don't know.
Not yet, unless that passes. Right now, we
What?
just send our entire package and then they have the ability to review it. They do not approve it at this time unless that will passes.
Okay. The second part of this same bill requires to submit the housing element development regulations to Commerce for review no later than 3 years after enacting or updating comprehensive plan. Is that what we do anyway, or is that something new?
Not for approval. It's just that we submit it, we may get comments, but they don't approve them. They just.
That's the change.
Yes.
Okay, this will require approval. Then, so that's one thing that's a potential bill that's facing us. Another one is the intent. I won't name the actual bill numbers. Much more.
It'd be helpful, actually.
We do.
Okay,
Okay.
I have them in the list.
Okay, it's E2SHB 1096 has the intent of increasing housing options through lot splitting. This, of course, has potential to affect Duval in many ways. My main concern is not individual owners that private owners may be, able or want to split their lots. Has more to do with developers and incenting developers to come in, buy houses, parcels of lands, and then in turn split that to make even more money for themselves. I think there's great potential for this to make that attractive to developers. Now, this one in particular it wasn't clear to me, but there, if you actually read the RCW that applies to this, says for cities with a population less than 25,000, there. It applies to cities less than 25,000 that are within a contiguous urban growth area with the largest city in the county. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'd be very interested if that means at all, or if we're somehow exempt from this. Go ahead.
As I understand the bill that's under development and consideration right now, there would be no exemption for Duval without lot splitting.
Okay, that's something that we need to be concerned about, although I still, I don't think we're in a contiguous urban growth area with Seattle.
We are not.
So
But
we're
as they're
exempt from that.
Well, as they're developing the bill, they would have to amend that RCW you're looking at.
They'd have to admit that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the way I understand it, there has not been any amendments made to the proposed bill that would exempt Duval or Lake City. So we got a win with the parking,
Yeah,
where we got an exemption for 20,000 under. As I understand the current state, there's no amendments that would exempt Duval from the new bill that would require amendment to that RCW that you're looking at.
okay, could our lobbyists clarify that for us?
So I did invite our lobbyists here for an update to council on 415. I'm just waiting to find out where they if they're available.
Okay, okay. Let's see, building codes, sorry, let me sit down. I think that there's a bit, bill two SHB 1183. Requires cities and counties planning and development to modify setback height and gross floor area requirements for specified types of development. That specifically would apply to, I believe, to ADUs. And make our building requirements, we could still have building requirements for or building codes, excuse me, for ADUs, but somehow I believe we make those building codes more lenient than they currently are. I'm not clear on that, but that's at least a possibility. And another one, ESSB 5611 would require commercially zoned property to include multifamily residential use. This also concerns me with developers, as we're all, I think, painfully aware, developers are likely to make more money if they build a residential property. If we're required to allow that, any commercially zoned area that we have in the city to also be residential, that's a big hit for us, and another win for developers. Good.
Yes, that's pretty much it.
So a couple of things. I mean, I think every time, we get those updates every Sunday, I try to send them out to council. I mean, as a theme, you'll see that the state legislature is really hammering home on probably at least 12 still current bills. I mean, we've already had some flush out, but there are at least 12 that would impact growth and development here in Duval. Because I think from the state legislator's perspective, the cities haven't done enough to support affordable housing. So no surprise, whether it's permit processing, that you can't deny permits coming in. I mean, there are a lot around housing, growth management, affordability. What you can do though, is if it would be helpful for me to provide you with language for you to contact your legislator, this is the time to do it. Is to reach out to your legislators. Now, the AWC put that together for us and we just sign on to AWC position papers, but in other areas, you can contact our delegation on your own and, suggest, either an amendment to different bills or advocacy for how you want to vote. Now, it'd be for you as a council member, not.
Understood,
Well,
understood.
And I just want to clarify on that, though, that any advocacy that council members do with our legislature needs to be coordinated with administration to make sure that any request or language is not in conflict with our approved legislative agenda. Because as a council member, if the council is speaking on behalf of the city, it needs to be vetted through us.
But I can propose, I can come up with language that says we're concerned for the following reasons, but.
Mhm.
Yes, on the city's behalf, it would need to be consistent with our legislative agenda.
Okay, and in that same vein, there's, let's see, it's 3 SHB 1491. A city may not enact or enforce any development regulation within a station area. I believe that includes bus stations. That prohibit the siting of multifamily residential houses on lots where any other residential use is permissible. Meaning, if we have current zones where it's single family residential zone, what we call those R4s, we would have to allow multifamily homes on those under the state. Again, to me, a number of these reflect that developers lobby the legislature very hard. Many of these will benefit developers. I see no benefit to Duval. I only see harm to Duval from this. One thing I would ask, since we are paying these lobbies something, can't they put in, maybe these things are not going to be beneficial to Duval? Do we need to give them direction to do that? I would like us to be better represented as a small, non-contiguous community within the county.
Well, I would say that council needs to decide whether or not you want to direct the lobbyists to make that. I mean, certainly Councilmember Schaefer, you have a perspective. I think the question for this council is your perspective shared with the remainder of council? Because I will tell you, if we don't do some of the things that the legislature is asking us to do, we will be in violation of.
And I'm not suggesting that we do not, I am not suggesting that we violate state law or anything of that nature. We do have the resource to try to change this under reconciliation plan. That's one thing. The other somewhat more drastic thing that I still think we should consider would be to become our own county. And I don't want to go down the path if that's good or bad. I don't know the answer to that right now, so I don't think it's worth debating, but I think it bears investigation. And that would exempt us from the GMA.
Councilmember McKenna?
I was just thinking, a lot of good discussion so far, but if we're headed in the direction of some kind of direction or action, we want to get this on the calendar, so it's scheduled, and rather than like take action with and go to the order, I know before.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that if we, come to some kind of consensus that we're careful, because I don't want.
Yeah, I didn't know how
Yeah.
these are going, and as city administrator said, we all have access to the report, so I, appreciate you bringing it to our attention. I do think there is some diversity of views across the council. I also think there's some other avenues we can explore, and we do number that in terms of whether it's the SBA or other groups where we band together and we advocate together, in addition to what sort of the WC is doing. So I don't know what the calendar looks like. We've got a couple things and busy, but we can take an action to sort of revisit the conversation. I obviously want to impact this legislative calendar. I think the short term is that what you volunteered in some language if we want to. Yes.
Yeah, I would recommend, so the next cutoff is April 2nd, and that's fiscal or policy committee in the opposite house. We've been given a list. I think that it would be most appropriate if we bring forth back some formal language to the April 1st meeting for recommendation to get that out as soon as possible. The reality is that we're not likely to be able to impact much in committee now. Where we're going to be able to impact it is on the floor, and some of these bills are not gonna get out of committee. So, two things, like we'll know where most of these bills are before April 1st, or where they're likely to be based on their schedule for executive session or otherwise. Some of them will still have to go through fiscal committee. Fiscal committee cutoff is April 9th. And then it is a fast cutoff from the floor to be able to be voted on in the opposite house of another 1 week later. And now that the revenue forecast has come out, I suspect that there's going to be a big push to start to focus on budget items. So reality is, once we get past April 9th, we're not going to see much movement on any of these, if any at all. So we're very approaching that dead bill point for directive session. But this is, there's a lot of bills here. And I think that the reality is, from 20 years of experience in Olympia, is that we need to prioritize which ones we want to put our effort into, because there's no way it's humanly possible to impact all these bills at this point without everybody being all hands on deck. And that's not enough. So just to be very transparent and honest about the work.
Yeah, I just I want to add one thing to that, and I think my intent for getting something on the agenda wasn't necessarily for this legislature, because I think we are going to be late, but we get some consensus across council in terms of how we want to pursue these, with growth, comes up consistently, and I think we have some diverse opinions. Councilmember Knapp.
Yeah, I feel like we're spending money on a lobbyist right now, and now is the time we're getting this. We need to provide feedback. I think the sooner we can figure out, where everyone stands here, and if we can get a consensus, it just seems silly to waste this opportunity of having a lobbyist. We're getting the reports. We, I think there are some, it's hard to hear that there's, somehow saying that we push back against some of these things, that we are in favor of breaking the law, because in my opinion, and not just in my opinion, if you look at GMA and our growth target, we are set to exceed our growth targets on just our pipeline projects. These aren't just pie in the sky, maybe they're going to build it. They've already torn the trees down and paved it over and are dividing them into lots and building the homes. That is our 20-year target of number of homes to build, and we are building them right now. And we haven't even adopted the 20-year plan, and they are going to be done. And my concern is that a lot of these different provisions that they're pushing in the legislature, if those type of things start happening in Duval, we are going to go so far over our growth target, and we will not have the infrastructure to support it. We have been told that the roads are not going to be expanded. There will be no capacity. We already know that transit is, we are getting very little additional transit. My understanding is instead of, coming every hour and a half, it might come in every hour. In addition, most people who live out here need a single occupancy vehicle. They're going all over. I think that there really needs to be a communication from our lobbyists of the unique situation we are in here in Duval as an island city, as a city that is under such rapid growth that we are going to exceed our growth target in basically year one of our plan. So it is a unique situation.
Sort of pause you there and let the mayor respond and then move on, only because this is moving into discussion.
Well, let me ask, this is what I want to propose. I think we need to talk about this now and find out, do we have a consensus? Where does everyone stand? And we'd like to add that to our agenda for the meeting. We only have a couple things, and I know that we've talked a lot about leaving the cow open to have important conversations. This is the most important conversation that this council can have. And we have a lot of items here. I understand on the committee of the whole that there's not a lot of time for just open discussion, and we have a lobbyist. This is the time. I feel like it would be ridiculous to not talk about it now.
So to fight that inflammatory language, here's the cold hard facts of having a lobbyist. We're paying a lobbyist to advocate for our high priority issues. our highest priority issues are our funding. Number one. Number two, we have an extensive list of bills that are extraordinarily complicated here. And it would be unwise to make decisions on what to do and recommend. These bills have been around since the first week of January. And this is the first time this is coming up. There is nothing wrong that this is the first time these bills are coming up in conversation. However, we have 2 lobbyists on the ground. There are 150 legislators. And if we divert our lobbyists to bills that we are not going to have any impact over, it is a waste of time and money and our taxpayer resources. This comes from 20 years of experience and knowing what's going on the ground there. And I do believe strongly that we need to allow our lobbyists to come and explain what they are having, the conversations they're having, and the information about the rooms that they're in. I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, being president of the Association of Washington Cities and having discussions on a lot of these items, some of these trains are not going to be able to be stopped. And we need to rely on those that are on the ground in Olympia to help make those recommendations. Now, if Cynthia goes back to our lobbyist and they say there is an opportunity to move on some of these bills, then that is the perfect opportunity to use their resources to move these forward. Right now, the revenue forecast just came out today, and there's going to be a lot of shifting with the budget. Truth be told, our number one priority as a city right now should be maintaining our state funded revenues when the Public Works Assistance Fund is getting swept of $100 million. That is real money that reduces the cost of for our taxpayers on every project that we do that we need a loan for. So it's a great discussion, but we are also at the point where, that is not a good use of resources, nor is it a good use of their time. Just like we do with staff in any organization, we don't have them work on things that they're not going to have an impact on. And so, it would be truthfully just flat out unwise at this point to make decisions on something where people are not having the information from our lobbyists that have been tracking these bills all session. Go ahead.
Well, so there's a difference between, I can have them come and give an update on what's made it out, what's up for vote. That I have asked them to come for the 15th. Now, that's a little different than, can I have conversations with them about what bills we might be able to impact, create language, like all that can be done in the interim. But again, I think we really need to make sure that it's the will of the council and not the will of individual council members.
Councilmember Keller?
Just a suggestion, given the time, during additions and corrections to the agenda during the council meeting, any council member can make a motion to add something. So if that's the direction we're going tonight, if somebody can certainly do that so that we can get on with our cow agenda, and then we could have the discussion during that time. I also agree with, I think timing wise, no matter what comes out of that discussion, that it would come back to the April 1st meeting though, because we would need time to connect with them and, deliver whatever happens in that discussion. So just a thought that we could kind of move on. And if somebody wants to propose that during the council meeting, that we can add it to our agenda tonight.
Any other,
Yeah, I'm
board
going
comments?
I would not be in favor of adding this subject to our agenda item tonight. I just think would be spinning our wheels. How many of us have read the bill? So I'm gonna really know what they say and understand the content of it. And the impact that they do all this. We'd be here all night. And I agree with what the mayor said regarding, what you can impact and what you can't impact this. So I would like to stay as far away from the discussion of these bills as possible.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, I just add one more thing. Our surveys have consistently showed the number one concern here at Duval, and that's growth. Those are the people we represent. I want to remind the council of that. Growth to our residents is, if not their number one concern, certainly one of their top concerns. If we sit here and shrug our shoulders as a council, and don't take some type of action on this, we are not representing the people of Duval well at all. If somehow you know, we think, otherwise, I don't know, because the surveys, I think, have been very clear about what people are concerned here. These items are forcing us to grow. These items are forcing us to become less of a small town. And I believe that is not what our residents want.
Thank you. I'm not hearing a consensus to sort of amend the Cal agenda for this evening. I think, there was a,
We haven't
Yeah,
gone
yeah,
around, I
yeah,
haven't heard
it's-
that.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
We can go around. Again, just from some of the comments that were made, if, you know, we can do a straw poll. I've kind of heard from Councilmember.
I just want,
couple
can I
councilmembers-
ask a clarification?
Sure.
I meant the council meeting tonight, not the Cal.
No, I understood.
Okay.
Councilmember Naplin said, and
Got it.
add this to the Cal agenda.
I meant the council agenda. I didn't mean Cal, if that's what I said.
Okay,
I
you said,
meant add
yeah,
it
you said
to the-
Cal in terms of the,
That's
so,
right.
so then we're
To
fine,
the later.
we're aligned, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't hear, because I was moving on before I did that, so. As Councilmember McHenry said, anyone can make a motion in the council meeting. So the review of the regular meeting agenda itself, you know, primarily. So if there were any, obviously the actual adopting the agenda will happen during the council meeting itself, but if there's anything that we need to move off of, you know, the consent agenda, we need to discuss that now. Stands, we can,
So we're gonna decide in the council meeting.
well, we can't take action to the panel, so.
Right, no, but are we gonna decide if we're gonna add it to the agenda in the council meeting?
We'll be taking action.
Yeah, that would be taking action. But we can't do that till the council meeting.
You can
No,
make a
no,
You can make a motion,
Okay,
yeah, in the
okay,
council,
till the
yeah,
council.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, Since the action itself will occur in council meeting, we'll move on to discussion items. The first being the special events policy, with Rita Moreno, community events coordinator, presenting.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Rita Moreno, the Community Events Coordinator. Thanks for having me here tonight. Tonight I would like to discuss the work we are doing on our current special event policy. So while John worked on that, the work we are doing is we are updating the special event policy. We have a work group that we put together, which includes Public Works, Planning Department, Emergency Management, and myself. So why are we updating the policy? Our policy is outdated. The last significant update to the policy was in 1997. Many practices and requirements have since changed after that. So in 2023, the city was audited by WCIA, and we have some gaps in our policy that need to be fixed. WCIA made some recommendations to keep the city in compliance with best practices for liability protection. And with this update, we will have improved risk management. Updating the policy ensures the city has clear guidelines around insurance, indemnification, and emergency planning, reducing risk exposure. Key areas of focus for the update would be insurance requirements. So establishing clear and consistent insurance coverage expectations for event organizers that meet industry standards, not 1997 standards. Emergency plans, so requiring event organizers to submit clear emergency plans, ensuring public safety and streamlined responses in case of emergencies. Next slide.
I'll get there, I promise.
Well, I forgot indemnification clauses, so protecting the city by ensuring event organizers are responsible for any liability or damages that may arise. So our plan moving forward is to continue gathering input from our work group, which, like I said, includes Public Works,
planning and emergency management. Then we will work with our event organizers and stakeholders to refine the policy. We want to make sure that they have a voice in what we're working on since it, directly affects them. We'll work on finalizing a draft of the updated special event policy that incorporates the WCIA recommendations and addresses modern event standards. We'll present the final policy to city council for approval, aiming to have it implemented by the target date of which I don't remember. We set a target date for this.
Summer.
Summer. And then most importantly, we want to communicate with all stakeholders. So clearly communicate the updated policy to event organizers, ensuring a smooth transition. So this update is about protecting the city, enhancing public safety, and ensuring a smooth process for event organizers. I don't know if you all are aware, but I myself, as a special event organizer, also have to go through the same process as everyone else. So it's Duval days, it's bunches of vegetables. So I see the value in sharing that information with them and making sure that they are all involved in this process. So thank you.
Sweet. Is there any thing that you need from, council beyond informing us in terms of support or assistance via already sort of influx, and this was just to communicate it back out to them?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that, before we're audited, get audited again on special events. So there's kind of a menu that WCIA gives us of which things we can be audited on. Last year, they took a special attention to special events because the risk has gotten quite significant, whether that's parades, dance houses that are associated with special events. They were very interested in making sure that cities are compliant. We have a few gaps. We want to make sure that we get our policy updated before our next audit so that we can, be responsive to our insurer. So ideally, we would have this updated by this summer. So both a policy, but the other thing, work product that we would like to deliver to the community is a user guide. So it's not just a policy, but also a how-to for our special events organizers.
Any other Councilmember Henry?
I just wanted to say, I love the sliding scale idea based on number of participants. I think that makes it super accessible. And then just something to think about going forward, because this has come up before with nonprofits, is some groups are nonprofits, but don't technically hold their own nonprofit status. So for example, Girl Scouts were organized in a way that each troop has its own nonprofit status, as were Cub Scouts and Scouts for America have charter organizations. So technically they're not. So anyways, just any thought going forward as you put it together, if there's a way to help them navigate that to still get the discount, because they are nonprofits, it's just they're chartered through a nonprofit organization. So just something to put out there.
Any questions or comments from Councilmember Napa?
Yeah, one other thing, I don't know if it would be in this policy, it could, but I think it would be helpful if there was potentially an annual report to council that just reported, here are the events we had, here's, whether the city partnered, co-sponsored, if there was some in-kind, just an understanding of how many events that come through the city. I think it would be really helpful, especially as we plan, as we budget the next year, different things like that. I don't know if other people would be in favor of that, but it would be useful information. And just the dates of when the events are too, because I think sometimes other organizations are trying to plan their event, and if they kind of knew, here's the events we've done in the last year, it would be helpful.
Thank you.
Questions from council? Senator, thank you. So next item on the agenda is a sign code update for parks, open spaces, and public facilities. Laura Thomas, Director of Community Development, will be presenting.
Good evening, Mayor Council. And no one's from the audience. Laura Thomas for the record. So this is pretty much our second step. If you could go to the next slide, please. So first we'll go over the timeline. So we started this project late December. We had one brief discussion with council that just said we were going to move this work forward with a written report in January. now we have drafted our second internal draft with Public Works and planning support. We will submit to Commerce this Friday our draft so that we can do our 60-day review. Anything within our zoning code goes to Commerce for 60 days. There's some exceptions where you can get a rapid fire review in 30 days, but it's pretty limited and this wouldn't meet that criteria. And then that starts the clock of 60 days. And then within that period of time, Commerce has the ability to make comments along with our other, our community in general, whether it's some of, sorry. I'm trying to get back on track with my brain. Sometimes it happens. It's been a long couple weeks. So basically the comment period that we go through with the public, this one, I would not expect a lot of comments because it really is just related to public facilities and parks and right-of-way signage that's needed for public works or special event type activities. So it should be pretty quick. We'll also need to issue a SEPA determination. So we're going to do that in April. Officially, Planning Commission will review the first draft next week, and then April 1st, you will see the first draft and we'll go over some of the big picture pieces there. It'll be under new business. And then we'll hold our first public hearing at the end of April with Planning Commission and then with City Council the beginning of May with adoption at the end of May. And so we'll hit that 60 days just right. We'll have a couple of days of comfort, but not a ton. So now let's just talk about, well, again, why are we doing it? Because we don't have an allowance for parks, trails, and open space within our sign code. Our sign code was drafted prior to us creating those new code or zoning code. Parks used to be under just public facilities, and now we've broken it out to say we have parks, we have open space, and we have public facilities. So public facilities are like your building, your wastewater treatment plant, your city hall, versus parks are like McCormick Park. And so we need to allow for signage, and it happens to come up where we have to start moving forward. We have parks that don't have signs in them. And then we just have aging signs as well. There's not a lot of continuity. So we're trying to close the gap. We're also, and one of our largest goals too is to make it more efficient and predictable, not just for us, but for everybody else. So we're working on those items as well. So just a couple, I'm sorry, can you go to the next slide? So a couple of big picture items. We're gonna allow portable reader boards for right-of-way projects and for community events. It's the right thing to do. Other communities do it. They're prohibited. We're also going to increase the signs for incidental signs as well, because right now it's limited to 6 square feet, which isn't a lot of area to do anything with. We're also going to exempt our land use signs, because technically those are signs and we don't need to get a permit for those. We're also looking at exempting sponsorship signing and signage in parks and open space, because that's going to be managed under the field rental policy. We're trying to get some of the things that we don't need in our sign code that are more municipal decisions. We are going to add sign types allowed under allowed uses, mounted and freestanding, and make sure those are allowed within our facilities and parks and open space. So we're going to be doing, right now we have a master sign plan requirement for a multi-tenant building or a site or maybe like Safeway where you have multiple buildings, so that somebody knows when they go in there that they can get some signage and it hasn't been all used up by other tenants. So it is a very common practice. We're going to do something a little bit similar with the parks, where we're just going to come up with a master sign program and say, this is what we're going to do in parks. Here's the different things that it could look like, approve it. And then that gives Public Works just the authority to go do it. So instead of doing it one permit at a time to make it more efficient. We're also going to have Planning Commission just review the Monument and Twin Post consolidated under the review of the master plan. We'll also allow more twin posts and monuments as part of that process, because right now, for the most part, you can only do one per site. And in parks, you might want 2 or 3, depending on how large the park is, so. That's something that was important to the city. And then we're also going to allow for departures of size and height as well, and we'll also do that. As part of that master planning event, so that way they can just figure out what they need. And we'll get that up to them, because right now we have limitations of like some signs are 8 feet tall, some are 10. So instead of just being solid, we're only gonna go to 8 or 10 feet, maybe there's a reason why we need to go to 12 feet. For some municipal purposes, but we're also gonna allow the development community and our businesses that same flexibility to go through the departure. So we're treating, for the most part, everybody in the same way. We are going to exempt A boards from permits for city-sponsored events, public hearings, open houses, and city workshops. Because that's one of the things we do right now, and it's ridiculous. And so we just want to make it easier. So we're trying to make a lot of those changes, incorporate them. I will note that this is part 1 of the sign code update. We still have that second part, which is which is the non-commercial speech that we're still working on. But this one took a priority and we needed to get done. We need to get our signage complete our parts.
Councilmember Nepo?
Can you go back to, oh, maybe it's too late, it's gone. On the master sign policy, I think it was called, or sign plan, it talked about that being approved administratively, but it would also allow for departures in size and height. And so I'm trying to understand, does that mean that it would just be an administrative ability to depart from our code of height and size?
Yeah, and we would create a threshold, so we would put some sort of criteria in there. And usually it's like the minimum necessary to accomplish the goal.
So like if, I'm just thinking an example is if we were headed downhill and the site was here, if the sign was short and everyone's viewing it from up high, you might say, well, that would be a reason you need a taller sign. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand.
Or if you're putting on a floorboard, right, with those kinds of things, like twin posts, so they
Okay.
logistically you need certain flexibility.
Okay. Yeah, I like flexibility, but every once in a while I like to make sure there will be some type of guardrail. So it sounds like that would be. And also, this is one other constituent brought this up and I hadn't thought about it. But at Rosenbach Corner, where we were going to put an event kind of sign, I received feedback that there was concern that that corner had been donated, and do we have the right to put a sign there? And then the other feedback I got was, is that a location where someone might have to focus in to read something? There's no stop sign, there's a pedestrian crossing. Could you end up with a distraction in a location where there would be a safety issue of a distraction of a sign? I don't know if that makes sense, but that was the feedback I had gotten. And so I don't know if those are the types of things that would be in a sign policy about placement of signage that could be distracting.
Yeah, we would always look at placement as part of a master, sign program. I remember Mercer, Steve wanted to address at least one portion of it, so.
Good evening, Council Mayor. Steve, just a couple words. City purchased through the right of way acquisition process, all the land around that space that we had to do, which goes past the creekway. So it's actually due to the parcel. So that isn't an issue per se. Site distance, I mean, we talked about putting it behind, actually kind of where the creek overlook space was, if we were gonna put in there. It is the most limiting conflict point. It's past the intersection, it's on a straight shot. Right now, there's no other driveways on there. I'm not saying the worries, I don't care where it goes, but trying to find a place in town where 2 of these banner sign systems can go is pretty limiting.
I know, I was excited about the idea, and then when that person brought that up, I thought,
We're looking there and we're looking at, in front of the Sequoias, right in the entrance to town on 203. So there's no other stop signs that aren't already either cluttered downtown or already have the water fan poles right above them downtown. So it's just a tough. Well, yeah, we got all the space we need. There's no,
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was, you know, sometimes when things are dedicated to someone, it means that they sort of have an agreement, you can only do certain things.
and that is a little touchy at the moment in the sense that the state of Washington is reworking some of the creek activity right there. Hoping to get their permits this summer. Who knows if they'll ever get to meet that as a fence anymore. I don't know how many people are left in the office, but we'll see.
Okay, great, thanks.
Director Thomas, did you from the?
I don't think I have anything more to add, other than we kind of just wanted to give a brief overview of where we were going. And we drafted it based on the premise that I provided this evening. And the next council meeting, you'll see the first draft and we'll just hit the ground running and get it approved so that public works can put signage up in the parks.
Thank you. We have some additional questions?
Yeah, and I apologize, this isn't related to signage for parks, open space, or public facilities, but it is related to signage for business owners. I had the opportunity to talk to a couple of business owners about specifically what they think the city could do better. One of the things that came up with both owners is signage and being somewhat more lenient with our regulations. What would be a time and place to discuss that? I mean, probably not right now, but what do you think?
I mean, technically, we're not updating business signage, we're updating this. And then the next one is
understand,
to update the non-commercial portion to meet federal law, what I would recommend is that they come and set up the meeting with the community development department, and I'll invite the city administrator, because
Okay.
we do allow
Okay.
a ton of signage. In general, I think, you know, sometimes the challenge is maybe they don't know how much they can have, or that maybe they need a permit. And sometimes their buildings are not designed well, especially the older buildings for signage, like
Sure.
I got a request in because somebody wants to do some additional signage on a building that's almost all windows, has a really small facade area and 7 businesses in it. So they're all competing. Those are things that we don't have control of per se.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's challenging to figure out where can we put more.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But yeah, I would encourage them to set up the meeting,
Yeah.
because we can always look at doing a phase 3
Mhm.
approach for climate code update.
Okay, good. Thank
Thank you. And the last regular discussion item is, again, revisiting the revenue options for city financing with, city administrator McCann.
Good evening, council, mayor, staff, community members who are listening in. I don't have any prepared information. I just wanted to provide an update to council of some items that were in your packet, some things that are under discussion, and then to take back any requests so that I can keep them, keep items moving through the agenda. And for your information and consideration. So the first is in the council packet under written reports. I was able to attend a meeting with the Sound Cities Association. There's a city administrator, city manager meeting. King County came to provide an update on all the levies that they are planning for 2025. So just to keep in mind what the county is placing on the ballot. So you'll see the APHIS, which is the fingerprinting department through the King County Sheriff. That's going in April. Parks is going in August. King County EMS is going in November. During that discussion, I was one of about 6 or 7 cities that to some degree prompted a bigger conversation on how cities are benefiting from the King County levy or not benefiting from the King County levy. So myself, Issaquah, Burien, and a few others Demand might be too strong of a word, but strongly encourage that Sound City take a more active role in advocating for cities with the King County Parks Levy. I did articulate that Duval was not served by the levy. There's no planned projects on the map for Duval. In addition, requested that somebody from the Parks Department prior to the levy in August come to City Council to talk about the Parks Levy. Now, it's not directly related to the decisions this council will have to make with regard to our own levies, but it is really important to know how property tax implications are going to stack up to the November election. So on the King County Parks, in addition, I know the PIC Committee for Sound Cities Association had a presentation about the Parks Levy with, I think, from what I understand, I'm not in that meeting, a healthy and robust conversation about why cities are
I'll give an update.
terribly happy about how King County had structured the Parks Levy.
I made the mistake of dialing it in right after getting off the plane. I was a little strong on sort of the Duval piece, so I'll give an update. We finished at 12:30 and I was tired.
So that's an update on how different, because there was a request when we opened this conversation that I come back and when I have information about the different levies that are going out to voters, that I provide the updates where I can. The next thing at the next council meeting, you'll see a draft RFP for election services. We need to get a consultant in place to help council on any ballot measures. Now, whether or not you use the consultant is going to be predicated on whether or not this council votes to go for a ballot measure, but we need to get a consultant in place. So that they're ready if you're ready, because we're a little behind the 8 ball. And a lot of cities are kind of taking resources. For instance, the city of Burien has hired, ACLS has hired election consultants. So quite a few cities are going out, and now is the time to make sure that we have an RFP in place and to get someone selected. Now, again, we can draft the track to be if council votes to exercise their discretion in having a ballot measure, then we would use this contracted service. So we can structure in a way that we'll use it if we need it, but we need to get one in place. So I will be working on that RFP and you'll see a draft of it in the April 1 on consent. Certainly, if you see any corrections, you can pull it off consent. We can talk about it. And then finally, once council gets date set for their retreat, I'll be putting together some models that were requested for what would happen if we don't do a ballot measure or a ballot measure fails, what are proposed changes to the budget in terms of some revenue reduction measures or expense reduction measures rather. I'm not going to prepare a report for that, so probably what I would ask from council is, you know, maybe a half an hour at your city council meeting to present some ideas verbally to you all. But we will, I spoke to Finance Director McMahon, we will put together some different packages for you all to consider in your retreat. And that was the update I wanted to provide, but happy to answer any questions or take more feedback.
McHenry,
So in my head, you know, I'm ready to talk about specifics and I feel like that would need to happen with the consultant. What I was curious about is, do we need to, you know, in a meeting when it comes up, do we need to move and approve vaguely that we want to pursue these options and then engage with the consultant? Or do we only need to vote on when we have discussed and come up with the specific game plan, I guess, is that?
Good answer. Okay. So I think ideally you would want to get your consultant in place. I mean, we should be having a conversation, I think, about what types of measures you want to look at. But the benefit of having an election consultant is they can show you their years of experience in terms of strategizing and positioning, you know, what kind of measure you want to go for, why. So I don't know that that answers your question. I mean, certainly I think council needs soon to have a conversation about whether or not you even want to use these services, meaning do you want to go out for a ballot measure? But we do need to get an RFP and a consultant in place in case you decide that. You are getting close. If you want it on the August ballot, you know, we would have to make a decision really quickly. We have a little more time for November, but not as.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Napoli.
No, I have been on those days, yeah, Councilmember Nevin, apologies.
I need to wear a big sign.
Yeah.
Councilmember Napoli. So as we're talking about revenue options, I really always think that we're also talking about the pending deficit. And, you know, conversations around, you know, how do we address that? We can address it by getting revenue, we can address it by, you know, making adjustments, finding cost savings. And one item that I would like to discuss, and potentially learn what kind of options are out there is for police services, if there's additional partnerships, if, you know, as I've said before, I'm not interested in joining up with King County. That's not something I'm interested in. I think there's so much value in a small city having local control. I do think that we have quite a few cities all along the Snoqualmie Valley that are struggling greatly with funding their police services. And I would like to ask, could we have some conversations potentially with the jurisdictions that are also facing very difficult budget decisions and having a lot of conversations about police services and looking for ways to structure to, you know, share resources, you know, potentially stay independent, but also, you know, we all have cameras. Could we find a way to share? I don't know. I mean, I just, there's a whole number of things that you can create efficiencies. And the fact that we're all kind of these on the edge border cities, we have a lot in common. And I think the values of our citizens are similar. And it just seems like an obvious thing to have a conversation about, especially since there are very specific conversations, even consultants hired to be looking at this in those other, or why would we not? And the conversation.
Mayor, how can I?
Yeah, in regards to, doing coordinated services, police services, we've done that before. It actually cost our taxpayers dearly in the fact that we did not have service most of the time in the city of Duval. And that was withheld from the city council for many, many years. To also add to that, the other valley cities that have a police department share are considering canceling that partnership because it's not cost effective. So we can look at that. We can always look at when the timing's right, doing things like having a piggyback contract where you buy cameras or certain equipment. It's not likely to actually save any money. It's likely to actually cost more money because of the administration necessary to do that coordination, extra council approvals with different councils, et cetera. So, you know, we just learned today on the news that King County is actually cutting more their sheriffs are having significant budget cuts due to the general fund revenue side, which is not surprising. And the deputy that's posted on Redmond Ridge will no longer be there. But I would strongly, you know, this is the only, as we've discussed before in multiple budget conversations, the only things we have to cut are city hall, parks, and police. There is no other place. If you want to cut Summer Stage and cut our community events and our grant services, that's the only place we have to cut. And based on our consultants that have talked about workload analysis and our needs of the future, we are still at risk because we still have key positions that we have been unable to fill financially, as well as the police department that still does not have, is not up to date on having equipment, et cetera. Unfortunately, it's a good thought. But in practice and experience, it's not something that's likely to yield us any benefit, and it's likely to cost a lot of staff time at a time where we really can't afford it and need to be focusing on funding the operations of the city.
My question for city administrator, sort of, I don't want to sort of shut down, because I think there's sort of two different things. There's from a budget perspective, and I think even some of the conversations that we had at National League of Cities, there probably are still opportunities to partner and leverage. We have some challenges because we're not contiguous, so that area between like some of the public safety a little more challenging, but what I'm kind of hearing, and just to clarify, is like identifying opportunities where we maybe partner, whether it's not police in some other areas where we have, efficiencies here, or we have a resource, even in the, some of the parks conversations, talking to their deputy mayor a little bit in terms of how we approach King County, in terms of finding ways to sort of speak to the common voice, leverage facilities. My question, I guess, to you was, to have that type of conversation, is that sort of more appropriate for the cow, where we bring some people in, or are we have the Snoqualmie Valley Association, where within the valley, we also have that connection. I was just trying to get a sense of what might be the best forum for that conversation going forward.
So I've had two different folks approach me about having this conversation. In different contexts. I think there's an interest among whether it's mayors, city councils to have the conversation about whether it's, I think this would be extremely ambitious, but I try to stay positive, like a Snoqualmie Valley Police Force. That's trying to get 4 governments along Snoqualmie and Fall City, all to agree on a law enforcement approach, but it's an idea. So from my perspective, once you engage in these conversations and you create a public record around these conversations, it needs to be the will of council. I am not going to have those conversations on my own without council directing it, because it becomes public to our police officers, public to our community, and we start establishing a record of negotiations on this topic. So that's my perspective. Is if council wants to direct those conversations, then I would suggest that council put on an agenda, take a vote for us to seriously pursue it.
So noted, we'll sort of talk about it. We'll have an upcoming and sort of find where it fits in. I think this is also something we could discuss within the retreat. And so one ask for you, John, I know we canceled the agenda setting because you're, I think, finally having your. We do need to do that outreach, but I know Councilmember Schaefer is sort of, you've got commitments beginning of April, I have things at the end of April to pull and find some windows, because I think part of that is up priorities within council where we want to focus. And I think that will drive some of the conversations going forward. So that was the last regular discussion item. I know we've got a little bit of time, not enough time, about 20 minutes, if we want to start some council, no, sorry, not the mayor's report, and then sort of that city administrator report. Yes.
I can give a quick update on a couple of the bills. So one of them, 1491, the transit oriented development, just scan through that bill. That does not impact the city of Duval at all, because we do not have a train station. We never will have a train station. 1096, that's bipartisan. It is scheduled for executive session on the 21st, meaning that it's a Republican bill sponsor and bipartisan support in voting. The chances of actually getting any changes to that, let alone stopping the bill, are next to nil. And as far as getting to the floor in the opposite house, once it's to the floor, still chances are it won't get voted on. And if it does, it does. But to put it in perspective, the House has had 1,040 bills introduced since December in pre-filing. The Senate 1,791. So it seems scary, but there's still, these are very few bills, relatively speaking, to the bigger component. And I will give an update in my mayor's report about another important bill that would actually benefit our community greatly, related to property tax. So just wanted to share that.
If you want to start with your mayor's report, or
I
can
do
you
want
say-
to
or we can do
wait
city-
until
we can do city
the-
administrator's report then.
until the formal meeting.
No, all good.
We can do the city administrator report. It's Public Works Night. The city administrator report.
You want to go first?
I'm
Want to go first and get back?
gonna let you go first, mine show. So I'm gonna first go to the next slide and turn it over to Director Lynch.
Okay, good evening again, Mayor and Council, staff and citizens, of Chesky Public Works. work activities for the last couple weeks. Interviews are being scheduled for the public work maintenance step 1 position, next week. So we hope to get through those. First review of the public works project manager, applicants is ongoing. That closed yesterday. Overlay bids are out. Public bid opening is on April 1st, not a joke, 10 a.m. Staff did produce plans, inspect the house again this year, usually saving sort of $40,000 in consultant fees. The roads being worked on is Third Avenue will get a RFP, retrospective rapid flashing beacon. Big Rock Road between 275th and 279th overlay, and funding allows, northeast 144th, which would be between 150th and Baton Road, which is the Water Tank Hill. I'm sure everybody agrees. Next slide. Other activities, we are working on the Parks Buddy grant due 4/3. We will be submitting for $1 million out of a $6.6 million pool. So that's ongoing. Storm and sewer pipe inspection crawler camera. We did receive bids. Recall we had a pre-authorization approval of $115,000. We did receive 5 bids. The low was thrown out because it didn't meet the qualifications. However, the second was accepted by Seattle Pump Inc. for $79,588 and change. That is well under the 115. Next, quick quote on this. I have reached out, as Councilmember Napoli made mention last time, of the partnership grants for King County. They have not called back. So not shocked. Next slide. But we're still working on other grants. The automated meter project. So we did solicit bids for that. So we're working on a plan, putting that together. Come forward, there is radio silent zones. We're working on how to mitigate that through repeaters and such. So you should see something from our group in May on that, which would bring automated meter readings to the city, an access portal to all the citizens who are customers, so they can see their live consumptions and other elements that will remove the city from being driving in circles and collecting all the water meter data on a monthly basis. So we're excited for that. You heard a little mention from Laura. There is a park sign inventory upgrade in process. So the design is complete. The map is provided. Most of what we have, I believe, has been told qualifies for putting together a master sign plan and planning department's processes. So we're pretty good to go on all that. We will probably either phase this in or ask for money once we know the exact numbers. We had 50,000 in the budget, design was about 25, and we're looking at about 72 for purchase and install of all signs. Next slide. Third Avenue. So construction is now complete. All we are awaiting is the streetlight system to be installed. Landscaping is in and looks wonderful. Next slide. Food for thought. So with Main Street South, which built Main Street from Ring all the way to Big Rock, there was conduit placed underground that is cities. So we have 2 empty conduits. This run looks like a lot, but it's about 1,000 feet. The left side of the screen is the 145th corridor where the power substation connects up top, but the power corridor comes through the treatment plant on Main Street. So that is Main Street and what is 145th. The west side sidewalk has 2 conduits in it that are empty. They run down in front of Pence and then across the street to a pedestal right south of Kennedy. They're not used for anything. They won't connect to anything else. We haven't had an inquiry from Comcast. So we don't have a lease. We haven't ever sold our conduits. All sales and leases of those kinds of things, whether property or other, go through council. I will talk to Oscar too, since this is a recent kind of development, but we allow Comcast to use that one of the 2 conduits to serve the city because our building is right there. Would we have to have an arrangement or a lease, or is it just serving the city and just choose to let them serve the city kind of thing? So just a little bit of information there and something more probably to come. So we'll let you know. Right? You got one more? Nope. Questions?
Before, Go ahead.
You asked a question, and I have three more things, I forgot to write them down.
I have one more thing that I wanted to add.
I could have had a nice image, I know everybody likes pictures, we did submit for the, building permit at Depot Park for the overlook structure with roof system. So that was submitted, we'll work through the building department on that. Larissa was contacted by our friends at Microsoft, who are trying to obtain another bus stop for their people who have begged for brochures. So we're working with them on the location. And then I think I thought out under DA McNabb's thing here, but we did hear from Snoqualmie Valley Transportation on the run between Duval and Monroe. That will be added back as soon as they can find the driver. Rick, you're looking for a little extra time, Mike? Driver, part-time. So, yeah. That was all I had.
Stole my thunder from my slide. We did, Director Lanchesky and I spoke today, so we as a city are putting in for Big Rock for the King County capital and open space for Big Rock. We are, because we haven't heard from Councilmember Perry about grant opportunities yet that are council sponsored, we're gonna use the youth athletic grant opportunity for the mountain bike, because it's a youth organization is a partner in that. So we're going to use that grant opportunity to apply for the mountain bike open space. So, because we didn't want to compete against ourselves. So trying to spread the love a little bit. That grant opportunity opens April 7th and closes May 5th. So we have a little bit of time. Which is needed because we need to collect information from the Snoqualmie tribe, which we'll do next week on their consultative process for coming out and taking a look at that space, but also the cost of our environmental assessment, which is largely what we would put the grant in for, is kind of design and assessment. So that's the approach that we're taking for the mountain bike folks. And that's all I had to add to yours. Questions for Director Lanchesky? All right, Director Thomas?
Thank you. It's hard for me, by the way, to see over here, so that's why I look at my a little bit, because I can't remember everything. Just a pretty quick update. The first one is that we are in the middle towards the end of PSRC's review of our transportation plan, our capacity and our housing. We are going to talk about it a little bit more in tomorrow's meeting. We might struggle to get where we want to go in a quick time frame. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I can tell you that the big picture is about affordable housing and having the capacity for that, and certification versus non-certification and potentially conditional certification. So it kind of goes into what was discussed earlier this evening. So stay tuned. I'm whetting your appetite for that. Design review for commercial daycare is next week. So that has been almost a year in the making, not quite. We have a public hearing, and that's in front of the hearing examiner. If you ever wanted to attend one, it's right here in this room. We have our transportation plan hearing starting next week at the Planning Commission. So our packet is going out tomorrow, and then City Council is on 4/1, and then adoption will be on 4/15. So it's definitely moving along. We have a pre-application for a 3-building commercial retail this week. We are seeing an uptick in inquiries for commercial uses, development, and then also redevelopment. It's usually this time of year too when we do start to see more of those, but this has been kind of exceptional on some of the things that we're getting in and getting asked questions for. So I think that's really good news. I think it's because the city has laid the groundwork also for those uses to come in. Sign code and accessory dwelling unit, that transmittal will happen this week, hearing end of April and May. This is the time of year where we report out to OFM, Office of Financial Management, for all of our building data, and that's what then derives our overall population number that we get in June. We are maybe looking at potential or request to phase a project, so stay tuned for that. If you go to the next slide. I have the same photo on the next slide. Every time I'm trying to do something that's a little more educational about the department. And so we have a meeting tomorrow for this particular pre-application. And it is on 143rd and Main Street. All those little like purple notes, those are already staff comments because we've already internally reviewed them and all departments are reviewing. And we provide a pretty detailed list of items that we want to have them look at if they decide to bring a project in. So one example is they're requesting 2 access points off of Main Street. That could be a no-go because we have to go through Department of Transportation. So we would be looking at 1 access point. So when we're in that meeting tomorrow, Larissa Grendel, our city engineer, will be on point to talk specifically about that and what those steps are that we have to go through for Department of Transportation. And you can see there's 3 buildings. One of the things that planning has said is like, hey, can you put the retail building up front and put the automotive one in the middle, just like from, what it would look like from the streetscape. So that would be a request versus a requirement, but it would be something that we would encourage. It's quite a bit. This is where the brewery was looking at going, and they were gonna look at just the area that's up on what I would call the northeast flank, which is on your right-hand side of the screen. That's where it was going, but you can see that this particular group is looking at, for the most part, a full maximum build out of the property. On the left-hand side is just an executive summary that they provided us. So they actually gave us what I would call their sales plan set to go out and start to seek tenants. We don't usually get that, and it was kind of nice to see it because we don't always see it. So Colliers, who is one of the larger groups out in the region, is taking this forward. And so they talk about like, what are the uses, what are the benefits? In a couple of the pages, like they gave a really nice standout, like, hey, Duval's a great community to come to. Why are you not here? So I thought it was really well done. It's the first time while I've been here that I saw such a good data reach for them, because they also provide a lot of data and some data that we didn't have. So guess what? We take it too. And then we provide that as well in our future planning. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner, they even gave me what the price of the of the land is, which is a little surprising. They don't usually do it. So that tells me that it's actively being, kind of shopped around. Thank you.
Questions for Director Thomas?
Councilmember Schaefer?
Oh, let's see, a couple questions. What is it? The access points on Main Street, do those allow left-hand turns?
Stay tuned.
Okay. I think that's a bad idea to allow left-hand turns.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I'm just trying to show you kind of what the
Yeah,
process and
gotcha.
methodology as we go forward.
Yeah. And so, the densities are 20 here?
No, the commercial,
Oh,
it's right on Main Street. And
I'm
right
sorry,
there,
this is all commercial.
this is all commercial.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood. Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then just a few quick updates. So this isn't really an update from our city hall, but I do want to let you know, so Director Thomas and I attend a Snoqualmie Valley Economic Alliance meeting. And I think it was perhaps last week, I don't know, the weeks are blurring, the week before. We learned that the city of Carnation and city of Snoqualmie both have their reconciliation hearings for their growth targets on March 26th. So as we've talked about in prior meetings, we have cities nearby that are ahead of us in doing that work, and we'll learn a lot from them. So once we find out more about the reception that they are getting from their reconciliation hearings, we'll be sure to bring them back to council and let you all know how those efforts went for Carnation and Snoqualmie.
And I'm gonna update as part of the pick step as well, when we do come to a little more detail on that as well, about sharing.
So just an update, City of Duval earned its Well City designation for 2025. And it's great. Our deputy city clerk has a lot of ideas for different activities so that we can keep earning our Well City designation into 2026. But one of the things that we do to meet our Well City designation is to have staff training, and we are finally doing it after this will be our third try on Thursday at the Riverview School District. I wanted to kind of ask council interest if you have any interest in reconvening the Duval Youth City Council. It's from a resolution from 2018. I have no knowledge. Oh, go ahead.
Happy to share on that one. So former council member Diane Berdinke, this was a dream of hers. We were able to get it through council. Unfortunately, staffing was not available. Too much time being focused on other issues. And so it's never come to be. As we all know, we didn't have a city administrator for several years. And so that is the primary reason why this has not started again. I think it would be, especially now of all times, is a great opportunity. If our staff has the bandwidth, and if Cynthia would not be bringing it forward if she did not feel the bandwidth existed, to start this up and start getting a new generation engaged and understanding government and understanding the true transparency and the role of government and how we operate. So I'll just put a plug in there that I think now is a great time to start it. So if council's interested, I certainly support that as well.
Okay, if council would like to do this, it's important and I will make time for it.
You need a recommendation?
Yeah, so this was just an open, are you all interested in having me pursue this?
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. I'm not interested. I think it's a great idea, but I don't know how we would have a bandwidth with, I feel like we bring up concerns and things that we need to address, and we're just, very frequently told that there's a staff bandwidth, we don't have the money, we're in a deficit, and this is not something I see other cities necessarily doing. There's also already these positions on the school board. I don't know, it's a great idea. I was excited when it first came forward. I was on council when we approved it. I'm just worried that now might not be the time. We've been talking about having, for example, Parks Commission for years. I think we might even have somewhere for something like that, and we have not had the bandwidth to put that together. And I think it's a great concept. I just don't. I don't see us having the staff time or the money to engage in that right now.
But I was somewhat concerned in that, we constantly hear that staff does not have, not have any extra time, so we need to decide what we're not gonna do before we take on something additional. So I have the same, I guess, concern here. What are we not gonna do here? And I know there's no good answer to that, but nonetheless, it will take staff time, Cynthia, I'm sure your time, I'm sure time from other staff as well. There will be lost opportunities. There are things we can't do because we are working however many hours a week on this. I don't think it's a bad thing. I see many benefits from it. I just am a little concerned it's going to take away staff time from other things that are more important.
I'll let Councilman Henry respond as well, but given the 2018 date that was mentioned, I would find it beneficial if you could just, that's why I asked for me, if you could share the resolution to get a little more context, and then we could sort of revisit it, but for that, Councilman.
Yeah, similar thoughts for me, to just remind ourselves of what it all entails. I mean, I know it does take some staff time. I don't recall it takes a lot though. And I also recall that there would be a volunteer from council to serve as the liaison.
Yeah.
In which case at that time it was Councilmember Brudnicki. I love this idea. I was so excited about it when we passed it, and then I know things changed. So like I would be happy to serve in that role, or we could all take turns and rotate through. I think it's a great way to engage with our youth. I don't see it as much more of a commitment than me hosting a council chat. You know, this is our way to engage with the community as well. We're getting a group of youth from our community and we can bring certain issues to them and get their opinions and perspectives and they can make recommendations to us. And I think it's fantastic. And I think it could help us in the long run as well, bring that different perspective to us that we're missing.
Councilmember Kupel?
I agree. I'm just wondering, just because I wasn't here when that came out. And it's like, kind of like the position on the library board where it's just a one person sitting with council, or is it their own separate board?
It's designed more for kind of like the cultural commission in a way.
Okay.
To be an advisory council, where, you know, they would create an agenda, come up with ideas and probably facilitated by city staff, let's be real, me, to bring to council, like, hey, youth advisory council would like council to consider this, or, think about this perspective. I thought I heard. So- I think it would function like that. I think it would kind of function in reverse too. If city council had ideas that you wanted the youth council to consider and offer their opinion. I, without having the resolution directly in front of me, I don't recall that it had any specific, you know, you have to meet, you know, monthly or anything like that. I think there's some nimbleness to it. But I can certainly in the next packet provide the resolution for you all to consider, but I just wanted to gauge if there was any interest in it at all. This certainly came up during NLC where there was just a ton of young people engaging with the political process. And there was some conversation about how to engage youth in the political process, making sure that there's you know, continuity and engagement with young people. So I'm happy to put the resolution in for future conversation, but just kind of wanted to gauge if there was any interest at all.
Yeah, and I knew we're over time and you got two more things headed up, but I just want to make sure that Councilmember Stoffel has an opportunity to.
Yeah, I'd just like to see the resolution.
Delete that in action or direction.
Yeah.
Or not in action.
Well, Steve stole my thunder on the second one, but so they are gonna put back the lane up to, or the route up to Monroe. But there was a question on whether or not we had a representative or how to get a representation from council on the mobility coalition, and anybody can join. So they, you don't have to be voted in, and I provided the email and contact for anybody who would like to join the mobility coalition. And then finally, America 250, that celebration kicks off in April. I get the emails for the 250th anniversary celebration that's happening all over the country. The first celebration is called Two Light for Tomorrow. Probably Two Lights. I probably dropped the S there. So this is where cities can decide if they want to display two lights in City Hall, library, schools, courthouses to recreate the historic moment of Paul Revere's ride. It will be from April 19th, the lights go on the night of April 19th and you keep them for a whole day. So curious if council would like us to engage in participating in that, and as this celebration continues throughout 2025, I'll keep bringing their ideas for America 250 to see what activities you all want to participate in. We probably want to put a lantern or something in City Hall, and then maybe, I'm not sure where we would put them. You can put two in one place. You can also just do two lanterns in the windows of City Hall.
One by one, two by two.
Yeah, exactly. So here's,
Light investment.
it's a fairly light investment, but I wanted to get you all comfortable because we're gonna start seeing these probably every month. Thoughts if council wants to participate in some of these America 250 celebrations?
Okay.
And we'll do social media and without my typos. I did this at 4:15 today. So we will, yeah, great.
Before I sort of close, just a couple plugs that Holly festival coming up, and also we do have a joint planning commission, city council meeting tomorrow, so while you're all here, just sort of a reminder so that we have folks in attendance. So with that, call the council of the whole to close at 7:06 p.m. and take a quick 5-minute break.
And for council's benefit, pulled up the resolution and sent it to you. There's no requirements, for meeting frequency or anything else for you.
Washington tours. Have you done any?
Hey, I'd like to call the Tuesday, March 18th Duval City Council meeting to order at 7:11 PM. Starting a little late due to extended conversation during committee of the whole. Would you all please rise and join me in the flag salute? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Alfred,
Here.
Mayor Marshall, you're the Shaker. Here. McHenry.
Here.
Mr. Supple. Here. Ms. Kaplan. Ms. Donovan.
Oh, here.
Ms. Schoolville.
Here. Right, we have a quorum. Are there any additions and corrections to the agenda? Oh. Go ahead, Councilmember.
What were you gonna say?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say.
No, go for it. No, go ahead. You got it.
Let's see, okay, yeah, I would, like to consider, I guess, voting on council direction related to the discussion we had in the Cal of the, five, I believe there were five legislative bills that I brought up, and whether or not we want our, the consulting lobbyists to address those.
Right, it was divided conversation in the committee of the whole, so I'm gonna go member by member on adding that to agenda. Councilmember Supple. Oh, I'm sorry, we need a second first.
Second.
Councilmember Supple,
No,
Councilmember Henry,
No.
Councilmember Naplan,
Yeah.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Yes.
Councilmember Kupo,
No.
Councilmember Mercer.
No.
Motion fails. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve this evening's council agenda?
So moved.
Sorry.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we have comments from the audience, and I will go ahead and, actually, we've got the rules posted, so I'm not gonna read them into the record because it is lengthy, but I will note that our rules do not allow for online comments. And written comments must be submitted by a deadline and then provided to council. If they're submitted after the deadline, the clerk will distribute them to the council at a later time. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to come and speak? And if so, please approach the podium or provide your name. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. All right, moving on to the mayor's report. So first off, as I mentioned in committee of the whole, I wanted to provide my mayor's report for the evening, a summary of the Association of Washington Cities Legislative Steering Committee call that was held today. For a reminder, that is chaired by the president of the UWC, which is me. It has several board members and as part of that. As part of that group. The bill of topic today was a property tax bill that actually provides a tax break for your first home and provides additional tax costs for a second home. It's a revenue neutral bill, and the Legislative Steering Committee has some minor concerns. However, agreed to support it as other with sharing concerns, but also wanting it to continue to move forward. This is a bill that it's essentially sort of like a homestead exemption. They're very popular in other states, especially states like Florida, where there are a lot of folks with second homes. And it provides a significant reduction in the state portion of the property tax, state portion only for your first home. And if you have a second home, then you're paying a higher rate for your second home. So that was, I do encourage council to look at that bill because that is an opportunity to reduce the burden on homeowners, especially those that are struggling with housing affordability. Also want to remind folks that the Association of Washington Cities has been having weekly legislative action calls every Friday afternoon. Every council member is eligible to attend them, which is where there is in-depth conversation about all the bills that were brought up tonight, an opportunity to ask questions of staff on the ground. So I do encourage everyone to start attending those if you have concerns about the bills that we've discussed. And again, just like our city lobbyist, the Association of Washington Cities focuses on our priorities. They actually do have a large lobbying staff and are able to address more of the bills. And I can tell you with certainty that the Association of Washington City staff is active on the bills that were brought up this evening as well. Additionally, wanted to share, of course, we did talk a little bit earlier about just about the overall legislative status. Did want to share just a brief, and I'll let Councilmember Mercer or Mayor Pro Tem Mercer and Councilmember Henry share other experiences about the National League of Cities. But first of all, I want to say what an absolute pleasure it was to have Clerk Patero, City Administrator McDad, Councilmember McHenry, and Mayor Pro Tem Mercer in DC. It made an impact for the city of Washington. Folks from Association of Washington Cities to the National League of Cities were impressed that we had such a large group. Because historically, for many years, it was just me, then it was Amy and me, and then it was city administrator and us. And so this is a very positive development. It was noticed. It was a very interesting conference. I can say that after 16 years of attending these conferences, it was the most surreal and bizarre experience I've ever had. To be very clear, the vice president did come speak to the group, and it was frankly embarrassing for many in the room. That the vice president actually did state that 20% of our affordable housing problem, or 20% of our housing costs are due to illegal immigrants who can't even afford to come here the legal way. So how are they buying $50 homes? He bullied people in the audience. It was clear that he came for a fight of all of these city elected officials from across the country, which was really disturbing and disappointing. After all the years of seeing people in administration of both parties, people of both parties up on the stage, I've never seen anything like it. That followed through with meetings with our congressional staff. And regardless of party, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fear about what's going on, a lot of recognition that what is happening day by day in this country by the administration is illegal and many of it unconstitutional, as ruled by the courts today on the demolition of USAID. And I think one of the things that it really hammered home as we watched things shift rapidly in the short time that we were in Washington, D.C., and it really reinforced the importance of the statement that most of the council approved and signed, because things have shifted so greatly for many in our community and throughout the nation since that time, and that was only a month ago. That there's a lot of fear and devastation ongoing. We have people that are legally here in the United States being detained and injured to the point of being put in hospitals. A news story just came out about, I think it's a British citizen that was detained at Boston Logan. His visa was withdrawn by the US government without notice. Same thing happened to a white blonde Canadian actress a few days ago as well. The situation we are dealing with is serious. People are being deported to foreign countries that are known to torture their inmates at the behest of our US courts. So this is about our democracy, and I want to share that information with our council and the community because we are in the most dire situation our country has ever seen and are in an actual constitutional crisis. The message from the National League of Cities was that cities and counties lead, and that we have more power than we think to rise up against the illegal behavior of the federal government at this time. And we are already seeing the economic impacts locally, nationally, especially in Washington State with tourism, with the country of Canada actually actively preparing to defend itself against the United States. And that is verifiable in public record. So thank you again for everyone that took that early and fast action. It's really important for not just those marginalized in our communities, but truthfully at this point for every American in the United States. So thank you for that. I did also want to make note that related to that, we have had emails and some interesting situations within our community. Recently, I did receive a hate speech filled voicemail that warranted conversation and sharing with the police chief, which was then followed up by a hate filled email to me. What's going on right now is not okay. And everyone in our community is created equal. Religious freedom exists for a reason. It's embedded in our Constitution. And I'm really calling on everyone who sees that to rise up and stand up against it and support everyone in our community. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you. We'll move on to council report. Does council have anything they'd like to share? Councilmember McHenry and then Anderson.
Quickly, I did just want to comment on, the vote to add the item that is passed to our agenda. I just want to say that I share concerns on those bills. I just, what the mayor had said about waiting to see at this point what actually makes it out and then going to that point. I just don't want to invest money right now fighting something that may not even make it out. So, but I share your concerns. So I just see a different strategy for it. So I just didn't want you to feel unsupported in your concerns. So yeah, I attended the Congressional City Conference in DC with our big Duval group, which was awesome. When we had our meetings with people on the Hill, we advocated for heating municipal bonds tax exempt was kind of the big one that NLT shared. Of course, we had a chance to advocate for local stuff too. We were in a meeting with Carnation, had somebody there for the first time, which was super exciting. And as Duval, we helped support their views as well because they very much impact us with the roundabout, Holt Dam safety and all of those things. So small cities helping each other out. So some of the topics roundtable, I'll keep it somewhat brief. There were a lot, but just a few highlights. Lots of stuff about economic development, grant funding, opportunities, a lot of uncertainty there, but still talking about it, infrastructure. That was all in the Small Cities Council meeting that Mayor Pro Tem attended with me as well. And so we had a lot of great discussion there, and we focused on sharing success stories and areas of concern and focus maybe going forward. So they're going to be summarizing that and sending it out to the attendees of that council meeting. Some of the sessions were about the housing comeback, partnerships and strategies for economic prosperity, safe communities, unlocking federal funding, building tech-ready connected communities, and it goes on. There were just a lot of great sessions. We had one big meeting with all the AWC people, with Senator Murray and Cantwell. Murray couldn't make it, but her staff was there. We also had meetings with Representative Schreier and Representative Strickland, who's we are not a constituent of. However, we were put into that group by NLC. And so it was good to share concerns and meet with somebody who wasn't even in our district to help with that. And then lastly, on the NLC front, funny enough, I won another raffle prize for the city. We joked that I should go buy a lotto ticket. So I know, yeah, it was the big prize. It wasn't like the puppy vest or whatever for the Salt Lake City thing. So this is an $8,000 value promotional video for Duval. So they're setting that up. There's been emails already, and it's sort of like a 1 minute, just marketing promotional economic development type video. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. Next, I attended an iftar dinner with the Dawoodi Bahras, where they were discussing their contributions to local communities, as well as they wanted to hear from us what else they can do to get involved in community. And there were people from Duval, Carnation, and Monroe there, so it was a lot of great support. And one of the activities we had was we were helping pack very generously packed food bags for the Holy Innocents Pantry, which is a big donation they were doing for that. I just really love supporting people in the community, and especially through the lens of basic needs, food being the big one. And then reminder, next council chat is Thursday. So is that next week? No, Thursday, March 27th, from 1 to 2 p.m. at Rustic Cabin Coffee. Thought I would take the opportunity to see, does anyone know for sure if they'll be able to come? I'm going, of course, but you're reading. Okay.
Yeah, I had planned to attend. I just need to see how the rest of it goes.
So yeah, I mean, when you decide if you can attend, just maybe update your RSVP to a yes, so that we can kind of visually check if there's, a quorum, or make sure we don't have a quorum, I should say. And just our last council chat last month was super well attended from not only the community, but we had a bunch of staff members come, and then council as well. We had 3 of us there. And then last thing, I'm registered for the AWC conference in June, and it's great. I hope others can go too, even if you can only go for one day, which I did last year. And if you don't want to drive, the flights out there are like $99 each way. So it's almost, that probably is cheaper than driving actually. So, you know, if you don't want to drive or you just have one day, just to think about giving it a try. I mean, I love that conference. There are so many great sessions, even if you could just make it for a day. That's all I have.
So, I won't sort of retread some of the ground that council member McHenry went over, again, just sort of to echo the great experience. Both in terms of getting to engage with different communities of all sizes, you know, from someone from Denver to another small town. I think one of the themes that was reinforced and kind of touches on something the mayor said is about the power of not just local government, but small cities. The majority of cities in the United States are small. Under 50,000 was the small city, but even the majority of them are much smaller than that. There was a city that had 286 people. So because you're really, really small. And that exercise, you know, we filled out ideas, which I did pictures of, as we defended as well. But a lot of, you know, getting kind of groupthink and different ideas. Some of them are more applicable to cities, you know, larger size or different tools, but there was also things that you could also apply or adapt at a local level. I think, you know, I had an opportunity to walk around the city, again, very sort of different environment. I walked by one of the government buildings where, you know, that literally was being cleaned out by the food truck. So it was, seeing it in person versus on TV is very interesting. I think we had an opportunity to do a lot of networking. There were some planned reception events. We went out to dinner one evening with the city administrator, Carnation, who I had known, and as Councilman McHenry mentioned, she was also in one of the group sessions that we did. And you could tell even amongst it was the day of the CR that we met with Senator. Well, actually, all the weeks, it was whole day, and you know, in advance of the vote, there was a lot of concern about how things could happen and the impact of it, sort of a federal, local, trickle down level. And then I attended, I think, you know, John, I know you attended a dinner with a group, and I attended an LGBTQ dinner, and even that, a lot of concern amongst the community, and that was reflected in the speech. I think more than half the room was empty when most residents spoke. So again, kind of reflected some of that concern and fear. But yeah, overall, a great experience, getting to meet people, hear some different views, share some concerns, share some ideas, and promote our city a little bit as well. So the video I think that we're getting is potentially, we saw the mayor of Salt Lake City spoke, and if it's anything like that, it would be kind of great that we can really showcase the local community as well as the city itself.
I'll say we are committed to getting the murals up to 4.
Yeah, so great event. A couple other things to sort of touch on before I forget this one, and then I'll jump into the pickup dates. April 1st, I think, is what we designated as the meeting where we're going to do interviews of the council candidates. Sort of a reminder, if you want to make those interviews, this is the time to sort of set up those meetings. But because we are doing it in one session, it's also the opportunity where they essentially respond to our questions. So typically those come from council. So if you have ideas for questions you'd like to see asked, if you could forward those to me or email them to me, and we'll sort of come up with the 3 or so questions that we put down as a group. I think the other sort of update that's been touched on is the pickup date. I had flown into Charlotte after NLC, and then I realized, you know, because of the time change, I didn't take the mayor's advice and cancel or asked Mike to attend. I dialed in with the time change, and yeah, it was a 2+ hour meeting, so it was quite late after the flight. And there were 3 items on the agenda: legislative update, which we didn't get to, the Carnation or the reconciliation process, of which Carnation and Snoqualmie mentioned, and just a little more detail on that particular piece. They asked both for an adjustment in their housing targets. Snoqualmie, I think, was a reduction of 781, Carnation of 499, and then there were a couple different ways that could be approached. They have to have the hearing. Obviously, the last piece of that really was from an SCBA perspective. They recommend you sort of reject it, accept it, and adjust the overall it's, or, we just accept it and then push it down amongst the other communities. And I think they opted for sort of option number two, which is to recommend sort of accepting the reduction and then not distribute it amongst other cities. So it'll be interesting to see how the hearing goes. Again, this is sort of it's an opportunity for us to learn from the process, because we have obviously similar concerns about transportation and infrastructure. The second one was really around levy, and we've had a opportunity to go around the horn. And as I said, this is where I was probably a little punchy. In addition to the talking points that we discussed, I really drilled in on the Big Rock ball field. I'm sorry, we potentially could leverage that, but also the ballpark, in terms of the conversations we've had there, wasn't on the project list, and I think the one thing that came out of that, which was a little different from the mirroring, saying, well, you have Marymore, this is about Marymore. It was really, the investments they made in Fall City, which is not really close to us. They've obviously invested in the ball fields, but it's not close. My focus was really, Marymore is great, but if you're a young family, you're looking for opportunities local, you don't have to drive far, you have kids and manage. And then really investments in recreational sports is another area whether they're partnering with us or, finding other ways through direct grant programs, which I think is something that we're interested in the city. I did have an exchange with the deputy mayor of Carnation, and I think, he's interested even in this. This goes to your comments, Councilmember Naplin, around opportunities to partner locally. We have sort of obviously a valley-wide, but Carnation sort of our closest adjacent city. And I know they use our facilities for sports, if there's things we can kind of try to partner or coordinate on messaging. And I know you do some of that already, but it's another opportunity for sort of council to, build some of those relationships and propose that. I think that was the big things. We did, well, I guess the one other outcome of that conversation was we were really split as a group, kind of came at the 11th hour with the emergency request. We sort of pushed back on that. We did ask for a briefing, additional information, which they were going to come back to us and maybe have a special meeting to sort of drill a little further. So no action was taken at this time, but I think there was a shared concern that some of these investments need to be targeted, not particularly around the equity, not just at how the funds sharing is split, but also making sure that communities, it's also distributed geographically where it's most needed versus concentrating in the larger municipal centers.
Thank you. And Councilmember,
Let me ask a question about, so I, just on a high level, was there any conversation about with the Snoqualmie incarnation limits getting brought to pick? Was there any conversation on, was this kind of a broader conversation about will these, when people go for adjustments, will they continue to go to pick for each one, or was this just a broader conversation about what role that, pick would play in that?
Yeah, so I think the one change or the one kind of that touches on this a little bit is that this was not viewed as an ongoing change that they were adopting. It was still going to be on an ad hoc basis in terms of, but they also didn't close the door. So additional cities, it could sound like they could bring these things forward, but it would not set a precedent in terms of.
Thank you.
go ahead, Councilmember Schaefer.
Regarding the selection of the new council member, we do that on April 1st, is that correct?
That's
This one, and in the meantime, those of us that, want to have one-on-one discussions with the candidates, we should proceed with that. Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Nansen.
Yeah, it was in response to Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Mercer's statements about what he was advocating for the County Park levy. I ran the numbers based on the information that came in the packet of how much our city contributes, how much Riverview School District territory contributes, which is really our service area for Big Rock Ballpark. That entire area feeds into all of our sport leagues that all primarily meet at Big Rock Ballpark. And the amount of money that is generated by our taxpayers versus the 150,000 per year that we're getting as our allocation is very, very small. I mean, it's dramatic. And anyway, I have the backup data and the numbers. Is there any way that I can send them to you and then maybe verify that I did my calculations right and have it shared? Just how much, like I said, how much the King County Parks levy generates for King County Parks versus how much the city gets back in the direct appropriation. And obviously, there's more things going on than just that. We wouldn't expect the full amount back, but just to gather an understanding of how much our residents are contributing.
We can do that, and I would also say that, we will have the King County Park staff who have all of the detailed calculations on how they did the parks levy, look at it as well. Because, the way, I don't know how they do it, but the way they do it is very, very specific. It's likely not to our school district boundaries as far as the territory and what they, consider as a service area. And that is something that they can address when they come and speak to us. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I want to be clear, I am not going to confirm that calculation. I do not have expertise in this particular levy, but I can send it to people who have an expertise in this levy. But I don't feel comfortable independently verifying your.
I just, the King County Assessment Department says what the assessed value is for different territories for every school district and how much assessed value we have, and I multiply it by the 24 cents per thousand. It's a fairly simple calculation. It's not the calculation that feeds our city allocation that you're going to get out of the levy. That, I don't know what their calculation is. I'm just.
Then that's comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
And that will skew any type of understanding or perspective of what's actually going on with the levy.
What I'm trying to communicate is how much our community contributes to the levy versus how much we get for our city allocation. I think I'm not saying they're apples to apples, I'm saying.
Yeah, the county will have that information and all of the data that they produce to produce the levy, and we'll get that.
And I was gonna say one ask that we had.
Plug in.
Not the calculation, that they were changing and that there was some discussion in that, but really more around. Something that Carnation and we sort of supported the ask was, which the King County Parks president sort of indicated, or he come back with it, sort of over the last couple of years, the wins that we've gotten, what projects they had invested. We did ask for that list, and they indicated that would provide that. So that's another way to look at kind of what we were doing.
Agreed, I thought it's important. I have a council report as well. I don't know. All right. I'll come back to that.
So hold on, please, and let Cynthia right now.
Well, there was two parts to the question. The original question was, around sending the information, your calculations. I mean, there's nothing to prohibit council members sending information to each other. So if you want that information shared with council and staff, I mean, I think you should feel free to
Send it to me.
But, and then the second piece is I'll make sure that I contact someone in King County Parks and just say, here's what one of our council members put together. Can you respond?
Yeah.
That'll be my
That'd be great.
advice. Okay.
Thank you.
So if you could please direct that, your spreadsheet to me, that would be great for administration. Thank you. All right, any other questions for Mayor Pro Tem Mercer?
Any other report? Yeah, so I am the DPP and, I forget what it was, where we adopted the bylaws or.
Yeah, Jade, I don't know.
Yeah, the updated ILA, that went very smoothly. It was adopted. And, there's really no change at our level with that. But what came up is that within time where the different jurisdictions were bringing up concerns or issues they were facing. And a discussion ensued about the jurisdictions on the fringe and what our challenges are. What sort of came out of it would be, should we have a little subcommittee to try to come up with, maybe recommendations or ideas to get the residents in the outskirts into higher capacity transit
And one of the ideas that was a council member rival brought up is, we have SVT. And their cost per ride is pretty low. They drive smaller buses, they're more nimble. And could there be a program where, SVT could be expanded, could we have more shuttles? I'm excited to hear that Microsoft is interested in having more shuttles headed to their facilities. Anyway, it's just a thought, and maybe if someone ends up getting on this Snoqualmie Valley Mobility Coalition, that person would help with them on that conversation, because we are building a lot more houses, and I don't see ridership very high out here, and we've done surveys about it, or people even interested. So this whole idea that if we build lots and lots of houses, somehow people will use transit, not under the question. So we might need to get a little bit creative out here, and like I said, potentially using SVT. So will they have a subcommittee to discuss it? I don't know. But it was put on the table that perhaps some of the cities that are kind of in the outskirts could have that conversation. Woodville is very interested. They also feel that on the fringe, having access to get into light rail. So even Sammamish, it's difficult. So anyway, wanted to bring that up. And then the other question I had, and it came from a constituent, was just curious how much the flower basket program ended up costing last year. And I know it was in the budget to be continued this year, but it wasn't itemized. And so I didn't have an answer for the person of kind of how much we expect the cost to be this year, and then the annual cost once we got the one-time purchases done. And then I also was asked, we were talking about funding, and that is challenging, about the funding, and I was told that potentially the Civic Club might be interested in providing some sponsorship type funds for that program. And I also just sent to everyone kind of my list of what other cities do to fund their flower basket programs. There's, a huge variety of programs. Some run similar to the Hearts, the Rotary Hearts, where they get sponsorships for each basket. I mean, the one little heart for Rotary, I think it's $60. So, to sponsor a basket, I think we could end up raising enough money to pay for the actual cost of the basket and flowers, and maybe even some of the watering if we have a program similar to that. And like I said, it's widespread. Most cities have a mechanism to fund that program. And I would like the city to look at that. We're in a pretty significant budget deficit, and so anyway, I don't know if that's something that is looking at. We talked about it last year. And I don't know if that's something that is currently contemplating.
No, we have not developed a program for adding that to sponsorships. We're kind of focused on special events this year and building out more of more opportunities for special event. Sponsorship doesn't mean that we can't at some point, but we have not planned that this year.
And I would just request if you can forward constituent email on to me so that we can have staff respond and get those numbers, that would be great. If you could please forward the constituent question on to me so that I can have staff gather those numbers and respond, that would be.
It was a verbal conversation. So do you want me to type out what I just said and then send it?
Yeah, if you got constituent information, we would most certainly want to get back to them with that information. Thank you. All right, any other council members have anything they'd like to share this evening? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to presentations. First up, we have accessory dwelling units with our Director of Community Development, Laura Thomas.
Then Mayor, Council, and staff in the back. This evening, we are kicking off officially our accessory dwelling unit policy update. So on the right-hand side, you'll see essentially what they are, which is it can be attached, which is an internal. So you'll see the blue area on the top and the bottom. So this would be like if you're converting an existing house and putting an ADU, maybe in the attic or the basement. Below is an ADU, which is an addition to your home. So it's attached to your primary house or you have an attached ADU. So those are the ways that we see ADUs traditionally, and we already have those versions of an ADU. House Bill 1337 was passed in 2023, and that policy allowed cities to complete their comp plan updates and then 6 months after to have their ADU policies implemented. So we're working on that right now, and we will have them completed by the end of June to meet our requirements. Right, next slide. So what are the basics as we go through and look at our policy and what our statute says? So moving forward, we will allow a minimum of 2 ADUs per lot in all zones that allow single family residential. So that's quite a bit. That's all the way up through all of our residential zones, not our mixed use zones, with the exception of the portion that's residential that allows single family. We will have to move the size requirement of our ADUs to a minimum of 1,000 square feet. So that's a little bit larger than we have right now. Again, attached, detached, or a combination of both. We already allow that, so that's not really a change. The change of owner occupancy can no longer be required. So that is something that was a requirement. So we'll have to remove that from our policy. We also will have to allow the sale or conveyance of a condominium unit have to be permitted. So they'll be able to in the future sell those through either a condo or a unit lot subdivision. So that will be coming up. We are considering requiring or adding a notice of intent to sell, and we're looking at doing that, especially for the units that were done before this law, so that we can make sure that we're okay on utilities and we know who's paying for what as that is navigated. The other change is impact fees will be limited to 50% of those assessed to the principal unit. Currently, we are not charging an impact fee to ADUs, but we are looking at that moving forward for park and transportation. Next slide. We also cannot limit the height below 24 feet. That is a new core requirement. So that might pose a challenge. Local governments may not impose aesthetic standard requirements for design review that are more restrictive than the primary house. Can't change our design guidelines to require something different than what a single family home will have to realize. The same is true for setbacks, yard coverage, tree retention, and where we put and locate front doors. One other good piece, I guess, of news is parking. We are still allowed to require one ADU, which we already have, so we won't have to make that change. We will have to do some additional code amendments outside the ADU to come into compliance with new RCW and definitions. So we'll have to look at our gross floor area, the definitions of attached and detached, principal unit, which we don't have, nobody has, honestly, that definition. So we'll be adding some of those into our definition section. The one challenge that we might see is that when we look at building height, we don't calculate to the top of a roof, we go to the eave. And so we might need to come back and take a look at that. It is a very unusual calculation, and we should probably meet more of what the standard is. So that might be something that we need to look at going down the road as well. One thing that we were thinking about, if we want to incentivize more of a single story ADU, is to provide some incentives to do that, which is maybe allowed a little bit larger so that we don't see the height. So that's something that we're looking at. We also will be amending the zoning code, which are like your R4 through R20 and U12. So all of those zones will now be allowed to have an ADU moving forward. So again, any zoning designation that allows single family, and even like our mixed use designations allow single family. It could be that at some point the city comes back and makes some of its higher density zones attached only, and then it would exclude those out of some of the higher density zones. I think that it would be potentially challenging to see ADUs in an R20 because they're on such small lots that it would have to be an internal ADU versus an external ADU. So those are just a few of the things that we're looking at changing. We are sticking to the very basics of what is only mandated and required for this update. And then at some point in the future, if we want to come back and do some additional work, we can do that. Next slide. So what are the next steps? Our next step is for attorney review and then planning commission and council review of the actual policy, which will come to you at your next meeting. And then we'll go through hearing and we'll adopt at the end of June. So that it's the July 1st.
Thank you, Director Thomas. Does anyone have any questions?
So for some of the elements that we are not allowed to require, but may be more aesthetically pleasing to us, I saw some about like the, location of a door or something like that. So more and more cities that I've talked to at some of the conferences we've been to recently spoke about how they want to incentivize more ADUs. And that's the reason they're doing this, is to have these pre-approved plans. So people who don't want to go through an architect or go through some kind of process, it's just easy and it incentivizes that they want more. But for us, I was curious if there could be an incentive there to have pre-approved plans that have elements in it that are not required and, they could work with it, but maybe they might just take that and say, oh, I like the way this looks. And so if making it easy because it was pre-done and is already approved, that they could, I don't know, it might have a higher chance of developing those elements that we like, but we can't actually require them. Is that a possibility?
That is definitely a possibility, not likely as part of this
Yeah.
update, because we would actually have to go issue an RFP and actually come up with those ADUs that would be essentially permit ready. Some communities have done that, and I would estimate that you would spend at least $20,000 for one, and say you did 4, that's $80,000. So I don't know if we have the dollars to do that, but what I would say is they could go maybe look at what another city has that already has approval and say, hey, is this something that can get approved? So maybe a little bit of in between.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Napa and then Mayor Pro Tem Mercer.
I'd be interested in that idea. Councilmember Henry, that's a good idea, and the idea of, sort of recreating the wheel, we'll find some other cities, plans that we like, and I don't know. It's a public record, can you borrow it, or are they licensed?
They're licensed.
They are
We
still
can't- like,
licensed.
all we could say is go look and see what that is, look up the architect and maybe call them. That's what we.
Those are the ideas, okay, that's interesting, and so. I'm trying to understand, it says, you have to allow ADUs everywhere, but so many of our new developments specifically, they used up every single square inch of buildable land.
Mhm.
So just based on impervious surfaces or setbacks, there's no room to build an ADU. So that means in effect, those areas can't build ADUs. Is that right?
Under our current standards, that would pretty much be the case. They'd only be able to do an internal conversion to an ADU.
And that's what you were saying. So you would create like an internal and existing structure, you divide it up and create a little kitchen and.
Mayor Pro Tem Mercer.
Yeah, so Councilman Kaplan touched on half my question. It was sort of how that works with an existing idle lot that's bigger, but obviously lots of lots, some that are smaller. And the internal, there's even constraints. We're not an area of the country that has a lot of basements, where it's very common where your daylight basements get converted. The second part of my question was really around how from a homeowners association or bylaws, this supersedes any of those as well. So if there are specific prohibitions within a HOA document around ADUs, this would trump, I assume that would trump that as well.
if somebody came to us with an ADU, we would not prohibit it. The homeowners association would have to make those decisions individually. So I won't weigh into that.
All right, thank you. I know it's more of a legal question anyway, but I was just curious if that was part of the conversation that happened, because this is obviously changing our, requiring changes within our current code, whether some of that is, but I assume there's some supremacy in terms of what it's, so. All right, thank you.
Anyone else on this one? Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, I highlighted a couple of things. First of all, I realize this is in effect in law. So there's little or nothing you can do about it, but I did highlight a couple of things that are of great concern to me, that should be concerned to all. The first and foremost, the fact that owner occupation is not required. But what this tells me is developers are going to buy up lots and convert them and maximize the ADU possibilities in them. And we will see it in Duval. We'll see it in other places as well. I think this is very counter to the intent of the law, but the fact that a specific person doesn't have to live there, doesn't even have to own that it can be owned by a corporation is disturbing to me. Reduced impact fees, so the ADUs are not even required to pay their own money. This of course relates to transportation and utilities. The fact there's no street improvements required to accommodate ADUs. Again, developers will take full advantage of that. 24-foot height allowed. These could be 2 stories. You can build a unit on top of your garage if you so choose with this. Again, builders will take full advantage, or developers will take full advantage of not only the horizontal space but the vertical space that they'll be allowed. This is going to increase our population density, put more burden on transportation utilities, increase our transient population. There's something in there that the city does not need to allow short-term rentals on ADUs. Fine, but that still means a month-by-month rental here. That still means to me a more transient population that we'll see here in Duval that will only serve to increase crime, decrease safety. Again, I see no advantage to this as far as Duval is concerned. It is only advantageous, primarily to developers to take full advantage of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaefer. Anyone else? Councilmember Kubel.
I have a completely different take on that. I see ADUs as being a way for families to age in place, to allow their adult children to have their own space, since housing is so expensive. I see that most people will probably build one as a place that and the kids can move into the bigger house if they've got family. You've got kids that are coming home from college and they can't afford to move out. You can have, the ADU for them. And I think having an owner there or not, that just gives you more freedom. Say you own the house, but you want to rent the house to your kids and the ADU to another family member. That just gives you more flexibility. I don't think with the cost of building homes and stuff that most builders building large lots and housing developments are going to build with ADUs. I think it's going to be mostly a more.
Anyone else? Thank you, Director Thomas. All right, we'll move on to our public hearing this evening. We have a public hearing on the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System for our Stormwater Management Program with our city engineer, Larissa Grandel. Before I open the public hearing, I will read the rules into the record. In adherence to the regulations outlined for public hearings before the city council, chapter 9 of the city council procedures manual, any individual seeking to address the council during the public comment segment must comply with the following procedures. First, sign in on the provided form subject to the public hearing, and second, thoroughly complete all pertinent sections of the said form. Upon commencement of the hearing, as announced by the chair, typically the mayor, the city clerk will present the chair with a sign-in sheet. Subsequently, the chair will proceed with the agenda for the public hearing. Each speaker will be summoned to the podium in the order listed on the sign-in form, where they must communicate their name and, if relevant, their address, affiliation with any organization or group being represented, and their corresponding role or position within said organization or group. Time limits for speaking engagements are 3 minutes for individuals representing themselves and 5 minutes for those representing a group or organization, unless otherwise determined by a majority vote of the council present. The city clerk will monitor and enforce these time limits, setting a timer for each speaker. Comments should be pertinent to the subject matter of the public hearing and respectfully addressed, with personal remarks being deemed inappropriate. Disorderly conduct, including disruptive behaviors such as bullying or harassment, will not be tolerated and may result in removal from the premises. Speakers may alternatively submit written statements, which will be added to the official record by the city clerk. Questions posed during the hearing will not be answered immediately, but may be addressed at the chair's discretion following the close of the comment period. Copies of city council and public hearing procedures will be available upon request and distributed to attendees at the outset of each public hearing session conducted by the Duval City Council. With that, I'll open the public hearing and turn it over to Ms. Grandel.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Larissa Grandel, Public Works. So it's that time again. It's our annual report for our stormwater management program. Next slide, please. I'll go over it really quick. This is basically to elicit the public's participation in our stormwater program and our annual report and our NPDES permit requirements. There we go. So we're in a new permit cycle that started last year in July. And it goes to July 2029. There's one new section within our core elements, and that is the stormwater management for existing development. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
No, okay. So each one of these slides just basically talks about what the sections of the core elements of the permit require. So we continue to fulfill stormwater planning obligations through interdisciplinary collaboration, long-range planning, and regulatory compliance. And we do this with our development review committee, which meets weekly. And there have been no barriers in this reporting period for low impact development related code. No barriers in our code to be able to require low impact development.
That's collaborated, sorry.
Sorry. So our public education and outreach section, we address and reduce impacts from stormwater runoff, affect behavior change, and create stewardship opportunities through education and outreach. One of those things that we do for behavior change that we've talked about and we will continue through this permit cycle is the Adopt a Drain program. We also partner with the Adopt a Drain program to go into schools. So there's a K through 12 element within that. And we do our public education and outreach for the school age children that way. Next slide, please. Tonight is one of the things that we do to elicit the public involvement and participation in our program. We also, any time of the year or day that anyone wants to email or contact us on the website, that's also how we like to engage the public to participate in our stormwater planning. Next slide, please. Mapping and documentation, we continue to use ArcGIS Pro, our geodatabase for our asset management. And that's continually being updated. Old Town is one of our most challenging parts in our mapping, but we keep going at it. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. This is to prevent
characterize, trace, and eliminate contamination of groundwater, surface water by monitoring, tracking, and removing any known non-stormwater discharges. We do this with through development review, we do this through site inspections, we do this through new building permit inspections and new buildings. We also do it when we inspect our basins and all of our facilities. If we see something that looks like it is not supposed to be there, that's the tracing to trace it back to where it comes from and identify it and remove it. So it's ongoing. Next slide, please. Controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites. We have an enforcement program. Some of you may remember last year, I believe, maybe the year before, we updated our enforcement part of code to be specific for stormwater. We've had a couple enforcement, I want to say 2 since we adopted that new code. One currently that we're doing right now. So it's ongoing to continue to control discharges from new development, redevelopment, and construction. And then stormwater management for existing development. We have historically taken opportunistic approaches to stormwater investments by leveraging projects to enhance stormwater management and infrastructure. Some of examples for that is like Third Avenue. Should we get that funded and move forward with that project, water quality that is not there, treating the impervious surfaces of the road will be incorporated into the project. So those are some of the steps that we use to introduce those enhanced stormwater management ideals. Next slide, please. Source control for existing development. We use our GIS inventory, our asset management, and annual inspections of our public and privately owned stormwater facilities and catch basins to satisfy this requirement. Next slide. Operations and maintenance. We use a program again to inspect and regulate the maintenance of privately owned and the facilities that are owned by the city. To maintain the city system. Proactive approach helps protect infrastructure and minimize potential impacts on creeks, streams, rivers, wetlands, and lakes. So one of the things that we do is we have a stormwater discount for our commercial businesses. And as long as their infrastructure is operating as designed, they get a discount based on what they discharged to. Next slide, please. And then monitoring and assessment. That one of the things that we do currently is we pay into SAM, which is the Stormwater Action Monitoring Consortium, it's a regional program that brings a lot of brilliant minds together and gets some really cool data and project starts going. It's possible, since we have done an internal hire, that we might be looking at doing some of our own monitoring now. And not necessarily paying into the consortium anymore. Next slide, please. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crandell. Public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to our only item of new business this evening, Agenda Bill 25-11, adoption of the city street tree list with our senior planner, Member Corey Davis. Or us, I guess it's Director Thomas tonight after.
Yeah, please. Thank you. We've got a little bit of a switch with the last minute, so apologies for not coming over and letting you know.
Oh, okay.
So honestly, we are super excited to have our first street tree list. We've been using the City of Seattle street tree list even before I came here. And as maybe some of you remember, we actually worked this program through a grant. So DNR gave us money and we utilized our consulting arborist services to help us come up with a really, what I would call a Duval specific street tree list. Looking at our different climate zones within our community, different like landscape strip with like small trees, medium trees, those types of things. So we're really excited to be bringing this forward. I thought I should try and pick the most beautiful street tree landscape I could find. You know, where there's houses up front, which is pretty similar to what we have in a lot of our new, the next one. So just a little bit of history. We definitely worked this through Public Works Department because like planning, we're just the pretty people that say things. But Public Works is the group that has to deal with the street trees and making sure that there aren't utility conflicts, which can occur. When you look at a lot of our street trees that went into our older neighborhoods, you know, they just weren't necessarily the right trees for the right location. They may not have done the soil amendment, so they have a lot of surface roots. So there's a lot of things going on in our community with the trees that we have. And so we wanted to try and create something that would help us better in the future manage street trees long term. So over on the left is just a little snippet. By the way, you can go into a site called Community Trees and look at the benefits for some cool things like carbon and all of that. So if you ever want to look at what your trees in your yard provide you as a, you know, health benefit or energy savings, you could always go into that website. Next slide. So obviously, why now? Streets are located along the traveled way and parking lots, sidewalks, neighborhoods. They're pretty much everywhere, and they have to coexist with all the uses around them. Again, trees that were planted a decade or more were interfering with city facilities, right of ways, honestly, street lights. Like I can't believe how many trees we put right in front of or underneath, like utilities and lighting. But we also have like even simple things like sight distance issues. So sight distance issues, you want to make sure you have the right tree and the right size of tree so that we're not ripping them out right away because they are a problem. We also need to look at tree selection. You know, you don't want to have a monoculture in your community either, because if there's ever like a pest disease or whatever, you might take out, you know, a good majority of your trees. And so what you'll start to see is a diverse street tree plan where we're not seeing the same trees in all the neighborhoods. Maybe we'll see it along one route, but then we'll see another tree, maybe in the same neighborhood. You know, not being overly eclectic, but just making sure that we have the diversity. And there are a lot of trees that are really cheap too, that don't last very long. And if they're not well maintained, you'll be taking them out in 7 to 10 years. And that's not what we really want to do. Not a good spend of resources, both from maybe our development community, but also the city resources and dollars. You know, one thing that we see if you drive through neighborhoods is, you know, a lack of maintenance of street trees too. So we're going to start to do some more education and talk about those types of things. 'Cause I think people think that their tree's just going to do its thing, you know, for 25 or 50 years, but that's just not how it works. We have wind, we have snow, we have all of those things, and everybody needs to be watching their trees. A lot of times people will ask us who's responsible. In most cases, it's the landowner. In some cases, it is the HOA. And in some cases, it's our responsibility, depending on where they are. The one thing that we see too is that we see that they can block signage for our business community. So we have to be more thoughtful of what type of trees do we put in those areas. We want something that is essentially narrow. So you want a more narrow type of tree. Maybe in your, let's say in your old town, something that's not gonna branch out and be, you know, 40 feet this way or that way. And then also the use of root barriers. You know, we've only been using root barriers for the most part over the last decade. And so where you don't have those that start to skull up sidewalks and do damage, and then Public Works is having to work on those sidewalks, either with, you know, potentially working with an adjacent landowner or us having to make some repairs. The other thing that you have is like, what soil are you putting in? What matrix? Like, how are you making it, you know, the best possible outcome, you know, down the road. Next slide. So we now, for the most part, have a list that's based on size, but it looks at growth habits, form, and adaptability to the microclimate conditions. So believe it or not, we have quite a bit from like being down at the river all the way to the top of our community. There's a lot of grade change. And so we'll be looking at the trees from that lens as well. So you can see we've identified small, medium, and large. Small is 30 feet or under, medium is 50, and large is over 50. And then we talk about where they should go and how much width they need to grow in. Next slide. So what's next? Obviously, we'd like to adopt the street tree list, but we will also start a process of updating our tree installation details, explore a Trees for Neighborhood program, create a street tree manual, HOA educational material, and homeowner educational material. So we can just start talking about some of those things as we move forward. That concludes my presentation and my pitch for a street tree list for the first time.
This is all good work and good news. Does council have any questions for Director Thomas? Councilmember Schaefer and then Councilmember Napland.
Let's see, not really a question, but a comment. So this is a terrific program, and I appreciate you and your team putting this together, Laura. Many homeowners, myself included, are pretty ignorant about trees in general. And anything that we have that would help us as far as selection, longevity, and clearance considerations and that kind of thing is going to be a big move for us. So thank you.
Councilmember Napland.
Yeah, on your intro page, you had, I believe, a Katsura, which is one of my absolute favorite trees, and it's not on the list anywhere, and so I'm curious why not?
It just wasn't selected by our city arborist. I don't know the reasons why. But we do have a process that if you'd like to select a tree that's not on there, that we can look at on a case by case basis.
Okay, it's a beautiful tree, but
They do tend to break more easily in wind and snow load. And so we've seen some damage. I don't know if that's the reason why, but I could go back and ask the arborist.
Thank you.
Do you have any trees that are banned, like Leland cypress? Because I planted about 25 years ago. And I still regretting it.
You don't want to get me started on Leland cypress. Just ask our entire team. I talk about the lack of worth of those all the time, but those aren't street trees. Those are shrubby trees, and that would be in our landscape code, which is different than our street trees. We are looking at updating our landscape code to look at some of those types of species that may not be appropriate because of like fire risk and those types of things. They are really susceptible. They're super dry inside, and a lot of fires for homes are actually related to Leland cypress. And so like if I had a magic wand, I would do away with them immediately, but it's a process to do that.
Any other questions? Councilmember McHenry first and then Napland.
Yeah, I lived in an area before where I saw them go through that pain process. It was the Issaquah Highlands long ago, and their first iterations of their street trees, they were cutting them all down after 5 years. Everyone's like, what is going on? And then they would replant new ones. And it was just those lessons learned of like, whoa, these are like damaging the road or something's going wrong. And then also not street trees, but in our neighborhood, our front yard tree, several of us had our beautiful birch, and they all eventually died from the beetles. They weren't that one specific kind. I think that's a little more resilient to them. So I just love everything you said about, not having all the same tree in one neighborhood, because if there was a disease, we're seeing that more with big maples too. You just see it start to spread around, and it's important to have diversity. So I appreciate this work. I think this is exciting. So I think those are my comments, but my one question is, we do have some struggling street trees in different areas of the city. Is there a plan to periodically address those coming from this list and maybe say, we need to remove these if they're covered in moss and they're barely blooming anymore? Or is that just maybe complaint based?
A couple of things. It would be complaint based, and it is the work that the Public Works Department does look at trees. They've been doing more focus on Main Street, but if you go a little bit further south where the grocery store is, like those trees are in this little tight, 4 inch. There are trees that can grow in those conditions, but it's challenging. And so I think that's something that Public Works would, is ultimately gonna look.
Councilmember Nathan?
Yeah, so one thing, and I don't know, how it gets addressed, because you can have the same tree and have the crown height be different, but one thing I've noticed. And, when I look at flowering cherry, crabapple, a lot of times they're kind of a spreading habit and the crown starts fairly low. And when you're on a street, and you have a bus going by, what happens is they either get pruned incidentally by the bus or the truck. Or the crew have to come through and prune them, and then on the other side, you have pedestrians who are, like tucking under, and so I'm just wondering if these small. Sometimes you have 5 feet, but you really want the tree to grow up and not create this spreading habit, and I look at. On 144th between 3rd and 275th, all those trees are just terribly misshapen because they have been pruned, like I said, both purposefully and by trucks. And not thriving. And it's funny, when I was thinking about this, I walked in, the tree straight outside is a replant of a tree and the crown is where the tree starts branching. The crown is about a foot off the ground. And so that's taking up sidewalk space, gonna start, being difficult to get in and out of your car when the tree is branching so low. So anyway, these are, hopefully trees that are not going to have a low crown, but how do we specify to ensure that the right tree, not just the right variety, the right selection of tree is planted?
Yeah, we utilize the arborist now to look at, do the reviews alongside with us when we have projects. So that we don't have those issues in the future, because I don't disagree with some of those trees. They wouldn't necessarily be appropriate, but in some places they may be. They are a tree that does thrive in our area. And we do have to watch, technically under our landscape standards, a tree before it hits its first crown is supposed to be 6 feet and 2.5, minimum of 2.5-inch caliber. And so if you get trees that are more in that size, you should be up enough where you have sight distance and you're gonna see it grow up. But it just depends on where it is. And we don't let somebody say, well, I'm gonna plant this type of tree. We go through a process with our landscape architect, but also in our arbors and also with Public Works.
Okay, and then just out of curiosity, it says something about having your, I think, planting specifications and care be updated. When I look at projects that are done by the developer, they're very strict. You can't have any grass growing up next to the tree, you keep a clear area that's hand weeded. You make sure that the root flare is at or above grade, you remove the twine, things like that, very specific. Do we have those same guidelines that are applied to city projects, or is that just something that we can place on developers?
I think Steve, our Public Works Director, is here, so he can better answer.
Project Director, Jesse.
Just like a board, we schedule our inspections just like anybody else. We're getting used to it.
Also planted, and I'm not just
One
saying.
more is, whenever all the new road projects, the PMs are scheduling their inspections like everybody else.
Okay, that's what I wasn't
Sitting in
sure.
the queue, they're just like everybody else, which isn't a long queue, but it's just part of the process.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else you see, folks? Seeing that you have an executive session.
And Troy does give us about.
Want us to take action?
Yes.
Oh, you do want us to take action.
Yeah, so
I did not say action on here,
Sorry about
so
that.
that's okay. Go ahead.
I move to approve Agenda Bill 2511, authorizing the resolution approving the city of Geelong street treatments.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes, and now we will move into executive session. And we will not be taking action after executive session, so for get on that with a couple bucks, you're welcome to stay up here by yourself if you'd like. Well, wait choice, but, okay. I have my view for, okay. Well, then, you're not on the call. So we won't be taking any action, and we'll simply adjourn when we come back. So,
How long?
how long are we gonna?
And then it's.
Twenty item?
Start with 10, John.
Generally.
I have my phone, John, now.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Meg. Meg is our new engineering tech in stormwater. So,
In person, do we select with the connect the picture and email it?
John, we'll do that.
continues to be under executive session and will now return at 20:45.
Resume session at 8:40 PM, and there, we have no further business, so without objections, we are now adjourned.
John?
Yeah.